Good morning, everybody. Are you all comfortable? Wow, is that a nice speaker? Might get some nice reverb on this. We can do a lot of music with that. Everybody's comfortable? Not too hot in here? Not too cold? Representative, come on up and bring your bill HB 117, and we'll hear from the prime sponsor. Wow, that's a lot of. Who's got the volume on this?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and honorable committee member. For the record, my name is Robert Wary, Bob. I represent Hillsborough District 13. I'm speaking on behalf of the sponsor, Representative McGrath from Rockingham District 40. She could not be here today because of other commitments. As a background, she has been a pharmacist for 40 years, and this is her bill, and I'm one of the co-sponsors, but I want to provide some of her testimony. Today, I don't want to, she has a 2-page testimony. I encourage you to read it. I don't want to take too much time from the committee or from the other speakers who wish to testify. So I will highlight a few key points here. Reading from her testimony, public health authorities are not infallible. History makes it clear that when we examine the most significant public health failures, a common thread emerges. These failures were not driven by doctors thinking independently or speaking too freely. In fact, the failures were driven by powerful commercial interests shaping policy, research, and public messaging. In her testimony, she provides clear examples. Tobacco, I think we can all remember, or some of us are old enough to remember, the doctors in the white coats holding cigarettes and advertising those. That did not work out so well. We also remember thalidomide, high-dose estrogen therapies. The food pyramid is perhaps a more recent example. These failures are seen by opponents of this bill as a reason to limit doctors' free speech. She would argue, and I would too, that the opposite lesson should be learned. In every one of these cases, harm occurred not because doctors questioned consensus, but because corporate power dominated public health policy while dissenting medical voices were ignored or suppressed. She goes on to bring a particular example from COVID. During the COVID pandemic, physicians faced professional discipline, investigations, even loss of their medical licenses for prescribing ivermectin for off-label use. And in her 40 years as a pharmacist, speaking for Representative McGrath, she had never seen doctors punished simply for prescribing the off-label usage of an approved drug. Off-label prescribing has been legal, common, and essential to medical innovation for generations. I would say in my 44 years in the pharmaceutical, medical device, and biotech industry, I would also say the same thing is very true. That is a common practice. Why did this come about? Is because the industries, government agencies, and media suppressed the use of ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. And this is why open scientific debate and physician judgment were treated as threats rather than as a safeguard to the public. New England Journal of Medicine and Lancet both had to retract articles claiming hydroxychloroquine was dangerous. I can speak personally that having traveled to India several times and taking it as a prophylactic for malaria and things like that, that when people were telling me you're risking heart attacks, so I've had it numerous times, and so that seemed very strange to me. Kind of skipping down through some of her testimony, we have often learned belatedly that pharmaceutical companies have a long history of minimizing, delaying, or bearing adverse events until they were forced into the open by independent researchers, whistleblowers, and litigation. An example would be the recent Pfizer information regarding the COVID vaccine, which they wanted to seal for 72 years, but were forced to reveal it, in fact. So this is not speculation. It's been repeatedly documented across decades of drug approvals. So her concern is not about one drug, one vaccine, or one moment in time. The concern is about when enormous financial incentives flow from pharmaceutical companies through government agencies, media outlets, medical organizations, and ultimately policymakers, all reinforcing the approved treatment while silencing independent voices in the name of consensus. That's not how science is supposed to work. So the policy question before this body is not whether we trust science. It is whether we recognize that science cannot survive when inquiry is constrained by profit and silence is enforced. Physicians are uniquely qualified to evaluate evolving research applied to individual patients and engage in shared decision-making, weighing the risks and benefits as part of informed consent. Patients have a right to hear about reasonable emerging treatment options. That is why protecting free speech for medical providers is essential. Limiting speech does not protect patients, it protects power. An example she cites from Dr. Joel Warsh in a recent book that he published states every doctor will agree that there are valid medical reasons for a vaccine exemption. Yet in California, it is almost impossible to give such an exemption without losing your medical license. So, who should we trust to follow the science? We should trust our local health professionals who provide their patients with risk-based informed consent that allows the patient and the physician to engage in shared decision-making. So thank you for your time and consideration. I will try and take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Representative, and apologize for being late. But I have read the bill, and you summarized my takeaways from it in that it's a free speech, protecting free speech of medical professionals. And I'm just wondering, and I know you're not the prime sponsor, maybe you could send it back to the prime sponsor, what the impact of the Supreme Court's decision yesterday has on this bill. In fact, Neil Gorsuch says, the First Amendment stands as a shield against any effort to enforce orthodoxy in thought or speech in this country. It reflects instead a judgment that every American possesses an inalienable right to think and speak freely, and a faith in the free marketplace of ideas as the best means for discovering truth. However well-intentioned, any law that suppresses speech, and I understand we're not talking about suppressing speech, but there could be, the examples you gave could be interpreted as that.
Yes.
Any law that suppresses speech based on viewpoint represents an egregious assault on both of those commitments. So it would appear to me perhaps yesterday's Supreme Court hearing could have settled this.
That would truly be wonderful. I think I'm semi-familiar with that case, and I think it has certainly broad-reaching implications and could well apply to the subject matter here.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So we have a very busy day today. We actually are going to lose this room later today. So we are going to, aside from prime sponsors, we are going to have a timer for everyone else that's going to be speaking. Sophie will keep track of that timer. So with that, I'm going to call Representative Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, committee members. I am Lucy Weber. I represent Cheshire 5, which is Surrey and Walpole, and I'm here opposing the bill. This bill simply is not necessary because providers already have the right to talk to their patients and give their patients the options, and they already have the right to use off-label treatments. And I am exceedingly grateful for the fact that my husband was given an off-label treatment for his prostate cancer back in 1996, which gave him 4 extra years that he would not have had had somebody not used a breast cancer medication that treated his metastatic bone disease. So this is already happening. The problem with the bill, and I understand the speech issues and the need to express the concept that there's an argument for either a new treatment or a different treatment or the suppression of a treatment. But this bill elevates good faith and something that's not knowingly false or misleading over an actual scientific evidence. And it also takes away virtually all authority of licensing boards, employers, insurance, and government agencies to regulate the practice of medicine, which is different from freedom of speech, because when your freedom of speech affects somebody else's body and bodily choices, I think that that's the distinction. We were told in the Health and Human Services in the House that ivermectin was now looked upon as being very favorable as a cancer treatment. I don't believe that that is true, and I worry about people who are losing opportunities for effective treatment because they are following the dictates of somebody who has a completely different mindset with respect to those treatments. But had I been treated with ivermectin rather than with a very minor invasive lumpectomy, my long-term chances might be significantly different. The other thing that concerns me is that this bill creates a private right of action for any healthcare provider against licensing boards, employers, insurers, and government agencies. And I think, again, the question is, what do we do if somebody's, in the full belief that it's true, giving really bad medical advice, and then we are no longer having any recourse, and neither the employer nor a licensing board or a court can do anything about it. My final note is that perhaps the Supreme Court having acted, we don't need this. So thank you very much, and I appreciate your attention.
Thank you, Representative. Any questions for Representative Weber? No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representative Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Gary Woods. I'm representative for Merrimack 30, which is the flotarial for Concord wards 5, 6, 7, and 8. So I tend to get around a little bit. I'm going to focus on a couple of issues now in view of time. I just point out 4 points I think are important in this particular setting as I oppose HB 1117. I think the way it's currently crafted, that it may allow malicious characters to have an unintended protection. And I think that was touched on. That may be unnecessary as it's already, this concept in this bill is already in RSA, and I'll get to that in 1 minute. It raises concerns about the conflict. If this were passed, that in fact it would be in conflict with this RSA, as I just mentioned. Lastly, I would agree that the concept that corporations are important, and that's evidenced by the fact that currently 80% of all physicians in the United States are owned by some form of a corporation, and private equity is right behind. Getting back to I forgot to pass this out. Real quick. This identifies exactly where it is in RSA. In the first panel, it says, and I've highlighted, physician-patient relationship in accordance with the American Medical Association Code of Medical Ethics. The second panel is, so we say, the rules. We pass a law and then the particular department makes rules. The second panel is New Hampshire Code for medicine standards of conduct. A licensee shall adhere to the Code of Medical Ethics current opinions. The last part of the panel is, and on the following page, is the general principles of medical ethics. And I've identified item 6, which is a physician shall, in provision of appropriate patient care, except in emergencies, be free to choose to whom to serve and whom to associate in the environment in which to provide medical care. And the last portion is actually an executive summary of what's called a CJIT, or Council on Ethical and Judicial Affairs at the American Medical Association, which writes the code of ethics. And this is just the summary of a 15-page, you might say, a Supreme Court opinion relative to the exercise of conscience. So therefore, for all these reasons, that number one, it's already in statute, and there may be a conflict. If it were instituted, I would urge that this not be passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Questions from the Senator. Senator Avard.
Thank you, and thank you for your testimony. So basically, if I'm understanding you right now, this bill would basically undermine what we already have.
There would be, to me, I'm not an attorney, but there would be conflict, and that would have to be resolved.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the senators? Thank you very much, Representative. Representative Bernardi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee. Representative J.D. Bernardi, Rockingham 36, Hampton Falls, Southampton, Kensington, Newton, and Plastow. I'm here as a co-sponsor of this bill and totally in support of it. Prior to serving in the legislature, I served 39 years in the pharmaceutical industry doing registration work to get clinical trials started, and if they were successful, register drug products. This bill basically memorializes the physician's right to practice medicine. And if you look at the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act as it was enacted, it basically says manufacturers and distributors of drugs must follow the principles outlined therein. But physicians and pharmacists are allowed to practice medicine, use their independent judgment, use their physician and pharmacy training to treat their patients. And this bill essentially memorializes that. It became necessary because under the last administration, we had the government using its power through insurance companies and most particularly through approval of grants. If Mass General wants a grant for doing X, Y, and Z, you need to follow the dictates of the CDC and the NIH. And that pushed down through the entire organizational structure because under the Obamacare and what happened there, we have consolidated, as the last witness acknowledged, 80% of our physicians are now under some corporate Uber structure. And so the ability for physicians to practice medicine independently has been consistently eroded by the evolving of our medical system. This bill turns that on its head and goes back to where we originally started, and we originally should be. Physicians should be allowed to practice medicine, use their independent judgment in evaluating circumstances and treating their patients. Happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Representative. Senator Avard.
Thank you. So if 80% of them are corporately owned, how does this change the pressure from corporate headquarters?
It's not going to change the pressure from corporate headquarters. I'm hopeful that the Supreme Court decision is going to push back on that a little bit. It will give potentially more physicians like those that signed the Great Barrington Declaration, the will to stand up against that. But yeah, we need more changes than this, but and that's largely dealing with Obamacare and undoing that, but hopefully we can get there.
Quick follow-up, if I may.
Yeah,
All
absolutely.
right. So, with regarding to rulemaking, there is a little concern that does this defang any rulemaking from what is it, the Board of Medicine? Yeah, the Code of Medicine Ethics. I mean, rules have to be made. Does this undermine that authority?
I think this would require the Board of Ethics to reconsider to make sure the principles of this law are embedded in their ethics rules.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the senators? No, thank you very much. Maura Weston.
Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Maura Weston. I'm here this morning on behalf of the New Hampshire Medical Society. The Medical Society is a nonprofit association of nearly 2,000 physicians and healthcare clinicians. Our mission is to advocate for the well-being of our patients, for our profession, and for the betterment of public health in New Hampshire. It is with this mission in mind that we oppose 1117 this morning. As a preface to my remarks, I'd like to encourage you to evaluate this bill in the context of the three bills you're hearing this morning. These three bills together create a novel framework for the delivery of medical care in New Hampshire based on an initiative first adopted in Montana. We believe that these bills individually and as a package create more questions than they answer. Turning my attention to 1117, for all practical purposes, we believe that this bill erodes evidence-based standards of care. It shields providers for recommending, prescribing, or utilizing therapies that are not part of the current standard of care. Rather, medical standards of care are based on research, clinical trials, and expertise designed to guide the delivery of quality care for our patients. This is not about communication. This bill permits practitioners to abandon the adherence to current standards of care under the guise of liberty and innovative therapies. First and foremost, this gives rise to potential for patient harm. The good faith standard is subjective, and it allows a provider great latitude to base recommendations based on beliefs or understandings, shifting the focus away from scientific validity. Further, the language effectively eliminates the Board of Medicine's ability, or any other current licensing board's ability in the healthcare arena, from holding providers accountable. Our professional boards are comprised of experts in their fields tasked with ensuring quality of care and maintaining a system of professional accountability and should not be cast aside. Again, we believe in the scientific process. Such a shift in our healthcare system in New Hampshire could potentially create issues of not just quality, but also patient trust. Lastly, we are concerned that this bill creates a civil cause of action, a private right of action, pursuant to which providers could sue, alleging violations of their free speech. Again, we believe that this is an unwise deviation and a disservice to our patients. Note that 332.042 essentially guarantees a plaintiff success given the protections under the chapter. And we think this could give rise to significant litigation. In conclusion, we ask that you support the highest quality and trusted care that our physicians provide with evidence-based medicine and recommend this inexpedient to legislate. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you, Maura. I mean, you asked us to look at the three bills together. I'm going to look at the three bills individually. And that being said, with 1117, so we heard some testimony, and I've heard around the country where physicians and healthcare practitioners were disciplined, reprimanded, et cetera, for telling patients about off-label things, et cetera. I haven't heard of it happening in New Hampshire. Have your members, have they had any issues with even, whether it be a disciplinary reprimand, administrative reprimand, or even workplace reprimand for talking about things?
I represent the medical society, so I'm not privy to any, in all disciplinary actions. I have not been made aware of any concerns. What I have heard from our members is tremendous concern about this initiative undermining the current structure built around standards of care and the oversight and authority of the Board of Medicine.
Thank you. Senator Avard has a question.
Thank you, Maura. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
So you mentioned that it's not a matter of communication. You did touch on the fact that there's a matter of trust. And looking back at over the COVID period and up till now, I think this is a pendulum heading in a different direction because I believe that trust has been violated. And I think a vast number of individuals in our communities feel the same way. Would you agree that this might be as a direct result because of bad faith medical practices? And I do recall people, bad mouthing. I mean, we tried to pass ivermectin as a something and it failed. And there was a lot of bad mouthing about ivermectin and all these others. Wouldn't you agree that trust is an issue that has been violated and that this is a direct result of that? Very vague question, I know, but I'm giving you
Sure, I'll do-
a little platform.
I
because you
appreciate the
disagree.
question, and I'll do my best to respond. I'm a New Hampshire native. I grew up here. I respect fully our character in the state of kind of live free or die, and I hear what you're saying about all that transpired in COVID. However, from what I hear from the physicians we represent, and frankly, based on my own personal experience as a patient, I believe that there's significant trust between patients and their physicians. I know what I ask of my doctors, and I trust their opinions. So, I understand what you're saying, that we've heard anecdotes. However, I have a lot of faith in our current medical system, our structures, and the current paradigm. And I would draw your attention to 33202, specifically subsection B. This isn't about communication. This says recommending, prescribing, or utilizing a therapy that is not part of the current standard of care, unless, or so long as, 3, the therapy is not expressly prohibited by law. So I think, everybody has the ability to communicate and have conversations, but when we get into prohibiting therapies pursuant to law, that becomes a wide open gate, right? And then the rest of this section goes on to talk about private right of action, and that, essentially under Roman 2, pursuant to the cause of action, the court shall also consider that medical and scientific knowledge is continually evolving and that good faith discussions of emerging research, innovative therapies, or treatment options consistent with this chapter are protected. So I read this to say that basically any action that a physician takes is acceptable and outside of the scope of the current standard of care. Sorry for the long-winded response.
No, it was a long-winded question, but I do have a follow-up.
Sure. Thank you.
If I may.
You may.
The fly in the ointment is that 80%, we heard in previous testimony, is this corporation and they're mandating. And then, of course, you have the insurance influence on this. And so we're wondering, how valid are the treatments versus profiteering? And I think that's the perfect rub that we have right here, because there is a thing of communication and trust based on the history that just recently happened. So I'm feeling a perfect tension between what has happened and this bill. And I don't know that this bill solves it, but it does bring to highlight there's a huge mistrust out there.
I appreciate the question, and I would respond by saying that this is why I encouraged the committee to look at the three bills you're hearing this morning, this and 1734 and 1735, together as a package, because each takes a step in the direction. And when you talk about profiteering, as we get into conversations on 1734 and 1735, one has to wonder if, for example, this actually invites more opportunity from the pharmaceutical industry to drive care as opposed to patient-centered care offered by our physicians in New Hampshire.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just going to clarify something because you said something a little interesting. So you said this actually would potentially drive inappropriate care, and I'm trying to connect the dots on the logic, right? So if this law were to pass and anybody could say anything about any drug, then conceivably, we know from the fentanyl opioid issue, drug companies were driving doctors to do certain things. And what the logic would prove, if this protection was in place, we could have a drug company driving a physician to push, prescribe, promote a drug, and there'd be no recourse for it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
D. Jurius. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Prentice. Did you have a question?
Sorry.
I do.
I have totally
it
apologize.
might
Stay
be-
right there.
I'm
Maura.
happy
It
to
might be
answer.
Maura and D, and I'm still trying to wrap myself around how to form this into a question with statements or pieces and parts of this that I'm concerned about. So number one, I did hear you refer to, which is the general principle in practicing medicine, and I am not a physician, which is do no harm. And I carry that with me all of the time. You focused in on an area of this proposal that is most concerning to me, which is 33202, protection of medical free. And I don't know if it's really free speech, because here I see this, and I want to know if you agree, and then I want to focus in on one area. I see this as just a wide open protection. Is it your position this is a wide open protection that you can prescribe, refer, practice medicine in any way that you want between you and your patient, and there is no recourse for even that patient who could have been harmed?
That is our position.
Okay. So that's number one. And number two, there's already been a conversation about trust between physicians or other healthcare providers that, practice in the state, or in any state. If it's a trusted relationship, is it your position that that the patients are listening to that physician, they trust them, they know them, they could take this advice and this conversation and practice something that is not expressly under, Section B3 here, prohibited by law again? And if they are injured in any way, they have no recourse? I mean, are we really protecting patients? Who are we really protecting here? What's your position on that?
Our position is that this does not protect the patients in a manner that is acceptable, and that our current structure
Okay.
within the healthcare system and the regulatory structure is, in fact, serves that purpose. And again, I come back to our mission, right? We're here to protect our physicians and our patients and that physician-patient relationship, which is paramount to our organization.
Okay, and you know what, I did not ask my colleague, the chair, for follow-ups. I just kind of went to number two, but I am going to ask for one quick follow-up.
Yes.
Sorry, and I didn't do it before, I just kept rolling. So going back in. We all have to give each other a little grace.
We work with
But
that.
when I recognize that I have moved from that grace, I try to get myself back in line. Thank you, Maura, for taking this next question. So although I currently do not carry a license to practice as a paramedic, I carry a certification. I have been licensed before. And if I were to be licensed again, if I chose to meet the standards and go out, and practice, I look at this section, again, going 332.02, going down to B3, the therapy that is not expressly prohibited by law. So I think about my time practicing, and I very clearly knew what the guardrails were. And there were a couple of things like, I'm just going to give this example to show you how medicine has shifted. We could not administer blood or blood products. Even during an interfacility transfer, we had to have a nurse with us. Now, there are some changes that are going on based on evidence that's moving blood into the field. But that being said, that was like one of the furthest guardrails I had. What do you expect, or what do you know is in between a guardrail like that for a physician or even a paramedic and the very basis by which they start out their treatment? Like, how does somebody make a decision on what is expressly prohibited? I mean, there are standards of care, and there are few things where like I just gave that example, but this to me seems so open-ended. What's your position on that? And do you have any examples? And maybe somebody in the room can come up and give an example like I just gave on whole blood.
Sure, I appreciate the question. Thank you. I would draw your attention to support your point that in Roman 1, a healthcare provider, including but not limited to physicians, surgeons, nurse practitioners, PAs, and other allied health professionals. So when we talk about regulatory oversight, we're talking about not just sort of the setting aside of the powers of the Board of Medicine, right? But other regulatory boards that oversee all of these practice areas that are so important. And we as a medical society view each and every one of those practitioners as an important part of the ecosystem, right? Each practitioner is trained, their education is different, their training is different, their experience is different, but they're all part of that important ecosystem to care for patients and sort of that continuum of care. And so I would agree with you that this is completely open-ended and that it makes it very difficult to know what any guardrails are, because essentially anything becomes permissible
And protected.
and protected.
Thank you. Thank you, Maura. Thank you, Chair.
Any further questions from the senators? Okay, thank you, Maura.
Thank you very
That was
much.
a
I
long one.
appreciate it.
All right, now Dee, we got you.
Good morning. For the record, Deanna Juris, Executive Director, OPLC. Just wanted to briefly raise 2 points in the drafted section 332.0:2. The office is not taking a position on the bill or the policy underlying it, but just like to make you aware. So there seems to be some potential conflict or ambiguity between Roman 1 and Roman 2 in section 02 of the bill. So the first one is pretty clear: shall not be subject to disciplinary action, professional sanction, or civil or criminal liability. But then in Roman 2, it says shall not face retaliation from state licensing boards. I'm not clear on what that retaliation would be. You know, if there's discipline that's opposed after a full due process and a hearing and an appeal right, would that be considered retaliation? I don't think that's clear, and it's kind of two different standards or two different things. So would like this committee to consider on a policy level which is the more accurate of the two and harmonize that. So that would be the first point. And then the second is that letter B, just above that, seems to imply more than just speech or conversation. It seems to be the practice, so recommending, prescribing, or utilizing a therapy that's not part of the current standard of care. So just to raise your awareness, it would significantly shift the current structure where standard of care is kind of the, that kind of keeps the guardrails up and that discipline can come, but it wouldn't be outside of a hearing process with full due process even before the board. And so I think that does introduce the potential that they could be doing something that is well beyond the bounds that is recommended, and that discipline would not be allowed. So there is some ambiguity there, which shift pretty dramatically the current framework. And perhaps that's the intent, but I wanted to make you aware of that. Lastly, I did want to mention quickly, this is not a concern, just an observation for you all, the enforcement and the remedies piece. So when it was talking about can bring a civil action. So any action taken by a licensing board, there are currently appeals rights, and it goes directly to the Supreme Court for any board action. So this one, with the exception of the Mechanical Licensing Board and the Board of Electricians. But other than that, they all go, so those appeal rights already go directly to the Supreme Court. This contemplates a different civil action in the Superior Court. So then you would have multiple appeals depending on the allegation, which sounds like an attorney's field day to me. But I just wanted to make you aware of that. That reality is any decision, whether it would be alleged under this chapter, should this be adopted, but for any reason, that appeal right already exists.
Great.
I'm
Thank
happy
you
to
very
take any
much.
questions.
All right, any questions for Dee? Senator Prentice.
Just, thank you, Chair Rochefort. Thank you, Dee, for taking my question. So is it your position that a licensure action for practicing, as you pointed out, practicing in this same section that I'm very focused on 332.02, protection of medical free speech, but it goes into recommending, prescribing, utilizing a therapy that is not part of the current standard of care. So if somebody practices outside what is considered the standard of care, which are things that licensure complaints or complaints that are brought to your office now. The way I read the language in here, and I want to see if this is your position based on what I heard, I think one of your first comments is a licensure action, which a licensee, knowing when they sign on the dotted line that they're going to practice within the rules, regulations, et cetera, of the state of New Hampshire, they could consider that retaliatory?
I think it's possible, right? I think that there is a discrepancy that the disciplinary action, professional sanction, or civil or criminal liability are pretty clear. That those are very concrete things. I don't know exactly what the intent of the word retaliation is there. Yes.
Thank you.
It seems to be two different standards.
Any other questions from the senators? No, thank you very much, Dee.
Thank you.
Let's see, Aubrey Friedman.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, Aubrey Friedman, I live in Bridgewater. I speak in support of this bill. I want to just concentrate on the point that's been brought up that I think is critical, is the lack of trust, or the way it's gone down from the statistics say 71.5% in 2020, and it's in 2024 it's 40.1%. This is trust in public health, professionals, doctors and hospitals. That statistic sounds pretty spot on as far as I'm concerned, obviously from the pandemic experience. And a lot of people don't trust doctors anymore because they totally messed up during the pandemic and kept their mouths shut and recommended. I remember, going to the doctor and talking about the vaccine and so forth. And of course, I wasn't going to get it, but he recommended it. And I said, well, what are the long-term effects of taking this vaccine? And he said, well, we don't really know. And yet he recommended it. This is disgusting. So I think, and I don't blame him, he's okay. I never had a good doctor, no problem with, it's just, he's doing his job, and it was medically within the box at that point that you had to try to get all your patients to take it, or at least recommend it. So that's the problem, what's in the box. And so this bill addresses things that are new and emerging. It's a changing field. The technology is rapidly changing, and they're different. Our bodies are all different, and doctors should be able to discuss everything that's out there. This is discussing, this is not, of course, the other thing too is this trusting. It used to be a special relationship between the patient and the doctor. And it's not there anymore as far as I'm concerned, because they're in the box and they have to stay in the box, and they have to worry about losing their license if they don't stay in the box. So that's the problem, and this bill addresses that issue in the right way, I think. It lets them discuss, we should be encouraging discussion to reestablish that relationship. It used to be like your doctor was like a family, part of your family or a good friend you could trust, and you can't trust them anymore because they've got to follow the rules. That's the problem. So I say let doctors be doctors again, let the discussion happen, and not worry about them losing the license. That's why I support the bill. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Aubrey. Are there any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representative Polizov, and that is the last speaker I have signed up.
Yeah.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Yuri Polozov, representing Merrimack 10, Hooksett and Dunbarton. I'm here in support of this bill. Legislature established a system of orderly delivery of medical services with licensing boards and healthcare providers. And it's true that we had cases that patients were harmed in the past, and it was hard to see a recourse. And it could be the case that provider is acting in bad faith, and that's why we have licensing boards, and this bill doesn't change it. If you see line 23 on page 2, it talks about a provider reasonably believing that the treatment may benefit patients. So if provider was not reasonable or acting in bad faith, this bill doesn't change it. But it's an even bigger issue if a licensing board is acting in bad faith, and that's what this bill is trying to clarify. There could be capture by financial interests or political interests, and that's the concern. I see it as just clarification bill, minor changes, so please support it. Thank you.
Great. Are there any questions for Representative Pauls? All right. Thank you very much. And if there's no one else that would like to speak on 11-7, oh, we've got one more.
Hi, Nancy Biederman. I am part of the New Hampshire Rare Disease Advisory Council. I am the parent representative. I am representing myself, not the council today. I didn't come here to testify on this bill, but I need you to be aware that we need doctors to be free to speak for rare diseases. 95% of rare diseases have no FDA-approved treatment. 95%. So if there is no treatment available and doctors feel like they are censored as to what they can and cannot recommend for you, where does that leave the rare disease people? There are 100,000 rare disease patients in New Hampshire right now, and we have absolutely no help from a lot of doctors. I have sat in the doctor's office with my daughter and other family members, and the doctors self-censor themselves, either because they know most often this is not going to get approved by your insurance, so I'm not even going to try to put it in there. Or they know that they can't recommend because their organization has said that they cannot offer this as an option. Many doctors who end up treating rare conditions and are the experts, you have to self-pay for them. Your insurance company will not cover it. They will not take the insurance because they do not want to have those handcuffs put on them. Again, 95% of rare diseases have no FDA-approved treatment plan. When your daughter is sitting in pain in the emergency room and the emergency room doctor doesn't know what to do, what do you do? What do you want them to do? I want them to try anything to get her out of that pain. And when they try non-FDA approved treatments, yeah, try it, because I want her out of pain. Believe it or not, oxygen worked once. Why, we don't know. But again, that was not FDA approved for the type of pain she was in. Should that doctor have not offered that as an option to get her out of pain? You decide. Handcuffs need to come off to doctors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you very much. With that, I'm going to close the hearing on 1117. Okay, with that, I'm going to open the hearing on House Bill 1734. And I will remind everyone, we've got a lot of speakers. The prime sponsor can introduce the bill, and then speakers after that will be on a timer. So I'll call Representative Kesselring.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, honorable members of the committee. Just for the record, my name is Representative Stephen Kesselring. I represent Hillsborough 18, that's Manchester's Ward 12. So before I get started with my testimony, we're handing out some different packets of information. The first one is my testimony. The other one is other people that wanted to be here that couldn't speak. In that packet, you'll see that this is not a partisan issue. It is very much a bipartisan issue with the testimonies in that packet. HB 1734 authorizes the establishment of an experimental treatment center model in New Hampshire and expands patient access to cutting-edge medical treatments while maintaining strong physician oversight and patient protections. This bill positions New Hampshire as the national leader in medical innovation, clinical research, and advanced care. It allows licensed providers and qualified entities to operate these experimental treatment centers with the authorization of the Department of Health and Human Services. It permits treatment using investigational drugs, biologics, and medical devices that have successfully completed phase 1 clinical trials and are not yet FDA approved, but remain under investigation and have documentation of safety and evidence. As you can see in my testimony there, I basically read it verbatim. I just wanted to add, again, a lot of speakers behind me. I don't want to take much of your time. They're going to answer a lot of the questions that you have, everything from the medical side, physician side. But what I want to say is what we saw from HB 701 last year was the sheer need for this. The speaker that spoke before on the last bill talked about rare disease and how there's so many patients. This bill takes what we learned last year, taking Montana's framework and making it so that New Hampshire can have the best law in the country and the best ability to help those rare diseases and those people. And I will take any questions.
Thank you very much. I do have a question. Page 4, lines 29 through 35-ish. Authorized experimental treatment centers may manufacture drugs, biologic, or devices on site or through contracted facilities, et cetera, et cetera. The Scientific Review Board shall determine appropriate quality framework for manufacturing and compounding under the chapter. We already have that. The FDA determines that through current good manufacturing procedures. Compounding is regulated under the United States Pharmacopoeia, Chapter 795, 797, USP 71, 85, et cetera. So are we sidestepping all of our current standards that we have been accepted and regarded by professionals in the industry as safe and dependable?
Thank you for the question. So I will answer the best of my ability. I know there's some lawyers and other people that'll be able to answer that a little bit more detailed. From my understanding of how we frame this out is so that we can have the legislative intent of how this procedure, or this, let's say, new program would work for the Department of Health and Human Services. Again, like I said, there's some lawyers behind me, different people that are going to speak that could probably answer that in a technical way for you, but it was just to outline this for the Department of Health and Human Services. To add to that, we did also make a change in the committee before in the House to make sure that the IRB was very much involved in this and had oversight. So we made some changes in the committee to make sure that that was done in a very professional way.
So you're not married to it?
I'm open to the change if you have something that would make it better.
All right. Any other questions from the committee? Thank you very much. I will ask you, we don't have standing in the back of the room. If there's no seats, we'll call you and Cole will come get you if you're not here to speak. So we ask that you don't stand in the back of the room. Thank you. I know Representative Kofalt was here. I don't know if he's out there. Can you check to see if Representative Kofalt's out there, Cole? He did. Okay. All right. Representative Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm still Representative Weber, representing Cheshire 05. On the surface, this sounds so appealing, but I think the problem is when we look at the actual provisions of the bill, there are really troubling aspects of it. These are treatments that have only completed a phase 1 clinical trial. That could be as few as 20 people. And certainly, harking back to testimony from the last bill, there's nothing that's long-term over time because you've only just started at the beginning of the process. You only have to have considered alternative conventional treatments before you go into one of these trials. You don't actually have to have tried them. So already you are sidestepping into these experimental treatments. The qualified medical institution is only defined as having generated safety information equivalent to a phase 1 trial, which again is very few people and very limited information. Oversight, the patient can be required to pay to participate, and they can be required to pay both the treater and the manufacturer of the treatment. The Board of Medicine has no authority to discipline providers participating under this chapter. Again, we have that problem. We have to be licensed by DHHS. An institution only needs a medical director who is a physician, one medical director. The review board is only 3 people, one a licensed physician, one clinical outcomes researcher. And all kinds of payment arrangements are authorized, including digital currency. What could possibly go wrong? You only have to keep 2 years' worth of records. Despite the fact that you're doing something experimental, we would want people to keep records so that other people could use research to broaden our knowledge. This seems to me to be set up to allow manufacturers to dominate the process, to go through a process which is very much unchecked. And the comment on my committee was that the people wanting to do this want to make the New Hampshire the wild, wild west of risk-taking, medical risk-taking. And I think that that's a really bad idea for vulnerable patients. So I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Representative. Are there any questions for Representative Weber? Thank you very much. Oh, Senator Prentice, you gotta be on it. You know, I missed that.
You had that hand up. Thank you very much. And thank you, Representative Weber. Good to see you this morning. I wanted to ask you about when you heard this in the House, there's 2 definitions. I was just going back and looking at them that I think are vague. And I wanted to know if you had any feedback from testimony, what you heard on the House side, a qualified medical institution and demonstrated safety. Any comments on those? Anything that you
I'm not remembering any, but those are some of the things in here that I think if you read it carefully, you will find that there are any number of contradictions and also, as Senator Rochford already recognized, departure from procedures that, I grant you, make development of a new treatment much more expensive, but are also intended to protect vulnerable patients, and these are all very vulnerable patients, who I am very concerned may be used as medical guinea pigs without appropriate guardrails for their safety. And again, you know, free speech is free speech, but when your free speech has an impact on somebody else's body through their medical treatment, I think that it's fair to have guardrails.
Good. All right.
Thank you, sir.
Representative. Representative Lucas.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. For the record, I'm Janet Lucas, and I represent Grafton County District 7, which is Campton and part of the Waterville Village Estates District. The bill under consideration today does provide for some oversight, as described under section Roman numeral 6. And also, and that would be lines 23 to 26 and lines 24 to 30 under section Roman numeral 4. It does not require, however, that research is ethical, risks are minimized, and that patients have either tried FDA-approved therapies or are ineligible for participation in an FDA-approved clinical trial. The National Research Act, passed in 1974, resulted in the ethical framework still in place today as reflected in institutional review boards. Respect for persons, including protecting vulnerable persons in research. Beneficence, obliging researchers to promote the well-being of individuals and groups involved in research by maximizing benefits and minimizing foreseeable risks. Justice, requiring people be treated equitably and that the burden and benefits of research are distributed fairly. This bill has the potential to ignore all three of these ethical guidelines. Requiring payment from research subjects is ethically suspect, since these experimental treatments have yet to be proven as much as is possible. Safe and effective through completion.
I'm going to try to save your time. I see you're reading from your testimony. If you want to summarize it in your own words, because I think there's a lot there. I want to hear it from you. I know you're well regarded and have a professional background. I want to hear it in your own words, please.
I don't believe that this bill follows through on fundamental requirements to practice medicine. Furthermore, I believe it endangers potential research subjects by subjecting them to a financially motivated process. They may be under the impression that if they don't pay, if they don't continue therapy and pay for it, that somehow they will miss out on an opportunity that is potentially life-saving. I think that violates a fundamental relationship between health caregivers and their patients.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Dr. Lucas? No, seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see. Representative Wary. All right, we'll start with Aiden Goki. Gosi.
Get your mic.
Yeah, I want to turn your microphone on, please. Thank you. And I'm gonna, if you're gonna read your testimony, I'm gonna tell you the same thing I just told the representative. You know, you can submit written testimony, we can read it, but we want to hear it in your own words.
Yes, sir. Sorry. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I'm here to testify in support of HB 1734. I'm the CEO of a company known as General Cybernetics. I'm here with my head of research, Genesis Lung. He is one of the veteran bioengineers that pioneered gene editing technology at Beam Therapeutics, which is a public company and one of the world's most well-respected genetic medicine companies. We're developing a therapy that is IVF with a corrective component for preventing genetic disease from before birth after the fertilization stage. And our objective is to preclude genetic disease that is in many cases debilitating and or lethal, that is untreated and unaddressed by the existing drugs that are regulated by the FDA. I want to be clear with what's at stake economically. So there are 6 companies in the United States developing this technology. There is no clear legal path to deploying it. So that's the level of conviction that investors and patients have in the life-saving potential of this technology. In aggregate, these companies have raised a total of on the order of $40 million. And these are new advanced therapies that are being developed in the leading institutions in Boston and New York City and San Francisco, and they're all looking for a home. And so what I see 1734 as being is a place to create a home for many of these advanced therapies, and additionally for many others that are not addressed by large pharma. They're being worked on by small biotech startups. You have the Boston-Cambridge corridor just down the street from I-93. And there are lots of life-saving therapies that have to either go to China because doing clinical trials in the US is too expensive, or they have to find some other way of doing it. But many of those companies alongside us were interested in setting up here, provided the regulatory infrastructure exists, and we bring with us talent and capital and advanced research infrastructure. And I see the potential for 1734 to transform the state of New Hampshire into a leading area for research and advanced therapies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the Senate? No, thank you very much. Nancy Biederman. Welcome back.
I want to sing.
I will try to summarize as best as I can. I will look at my paper to make sure I'm not forgetting anything that I need to say.
We'll cut a cheat sheet. Don't read it. Just use it as a cheat sheet.
I'm not reading. I'm just going to glance at it. You know, got to get back in my teacher mode here.
Yes.
Nancy Biederman. I am a parent representative of the New Hampshire Rare Disease Advisory Council. And I'm representing myself, not the council today. To say that I am in the rare disease community is just can't even tell you exactly what it means. I am a mother, I am a daughter, I am a sister, I'm an aunt of rare disease patients. Our family is rare disease. According to the National Organization of Rare Disorders, 1 in 10 Americans are living with a rare disease. That means 30 million Americans. And I just told you that equates to about 100,000 New Hampshire residents based on our current population. On average, it takes 10 years to get a diagnosis, on average. It took my mom 50 years. Unless, of course, it's picked up by newborn screening. Currently, New Hampshire has only 37 tests for newborn screening. It'll be up to 40. We've just added 3 more. Just to let you know, Florida just passed their Sunshine Genetics Act. They're going to be testing 650 to 700 genetic genomes for rare conditions. I watched my mother for years being dismissed by doctors, and her conditions being, and her symptoms just saying, no big deal. And that happens a lot with rare disease patients, because as a rare disease person, you are constantly being ignored, and doctors are always taught when you hear symptoms or hoofbeats to think of horses and not zebras. But our family is a bunch of zebras. By the time my mom was diagnosed, she was close to death. One physician assistant just happened to do one type of blood work and said, let's see if this is going to be, and see what this result will be. And she was days from having a massive stroke and dying. After she was diagnosed, then we ended up finding treatments, and then she ended up at the NIH. Even though she was at the NIH, they still didn't find the genetic marker for her. Just to let you know, there's over 7,000 rare conditions that have been identified by the National Organizations of Rare Diseases. Even all those diseases, they also have multiple types. My mom's rare diseases have 4 types. The disease that my daughter has, there's 13 types. So you can imagine 7,000 increases immensely. And just for people that think that patients and parents don't know their rare disease, we become the experts. We understand, and we actually know probably a little bit more than most doctors do about our rare diseases. In fact, I was able to go to the National Organization of Rare Disease Summit down in Washington, D.C. a couple of years ago. And as I was going to different booths and talking to different people, I was constantly asked what my medical degree is. And I said, my medical degree
I'm going to open it up to
M.O.N.
questions. From the committee, I'm going to ask you to submit your testimony.
Yes.
And I'm going to say the same thing to Aiden. I know you had some written testimony. You want to submit it to the committee staff. They'll make sure we get all of that. That goes for everyone here. But we are going to lose this room today. So that's why I want to make sure we get.
I know. I was trying to talk as fast as I could.
I know. So, are there any questions for Nancy? And again, I don't like cutting people off, but we're under the gun here today.
2 things, if I may.
Yeah.
Real quickly. And I didn't know if you were in support or against.
I'm in support of this bill. We need treatment centers.
My second question. Wasn't too long ago that there was a SWAT team that was sent out in Las Vegas for biolab. Would this increase these biolabs from being propping up all around the country without any repercussions? My concern is, we just heard testimony about engineering, right? And so there was a SWAT team that went to this place in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And there were some sinister things going on. If we pass this bill, does that just take away some of the guardrails from preventing that from happening everywhere?
I don't know if it's going to prevent foreign entities from opening these biolabs, and that is what I understand. That biolab was not a U.S. company. It was a foreign company. And I think part of that was an issue, is that it was a foreign entity, if I remember the story correctly.
And I'm just taking into consideration the previous testimony.
Yes.
So that's all I wanted to know. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. And again, if you want to submit your comments to the staff, they'll get them to us.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Maura Weston.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Maura Weston, and I'm here this morning on behalf of the New Hampshire Medical Society. We are here in opposition to House Bill 1734. The New Hampshire Medical Society is a not-for-profit association of nearly 2,000 physicians and healthcare providers in New Hampshire. Our organization's mission is to advocate for the well-being of our patients, for our profession, and the betterment of public health in New Hampshire. With this mission in mind, we oppose HB 1734 this morning. If passed, obviously this bill would enable the creation of experimental treatment centers that can provide drugs, biologics, or devices that have completed only phase 1 of clinical trials. My understanding is that phase 1 of trials focuses on evaluating potential safety and dosage issues, not at all on efficacy. We believe that the administration of these drugs or devices prior to completion of full clinical trials removes the very important input of the FDA. Further, I'll point you to Section 126 ZZ6, which permits on-site manufacturing and use of treatments potentially 126 ZZ6. It's on page 4 of the bill at the bottom of the page. This section authorizes, it basically permits on-site manufacturing and use of treatments. And we believe that this potentially exposes patients to many and varied harms. If these experimental treatment centers can manufacture drugs on site or through contracted relationships, which this would allow, it harkens me back to Senator Rocheford's question during the prior hearing relative to the opioid crisis. One has to wonder if this type of latitude is given, what the effects might be for patients. Again, we think that this is complex. It's an alternative approach to care and raises more questions than it answers. It raises ethical concerns, particularly in the context that ETCs are authorized to charge patients directly for experimental treatments. It's outside the scope of DOI oversight. And in conclusion, this again, once removes these practitioners from liability under the Board of Medicine and regulatory oversight. We ask that you recommend this bill inexpedient to legislate, and I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Maura. And if you've got stuff you want to submit, you can submit it, but.
I'm speaking from notes, and I'm happy to draft and submit for the record.
No, I saw all the papers there. So
It's
just
my
going back
handwriting.
so I don't know whether you're aware of this or not, but your members or the members that you represent are getting a significant number of correspondence, not only from industry, but also from, there's been some correspondence from FDA to physicians, warning them about products that are being introduced to the market that are being sold to patients that have research grade chemicals that are being sold as drugs. So there's a difference between a research grade and a USP grade or an FDA approved. So I guess the question is, are you aware that, you know, as you speak to that section in the bill, that your members are being communicated to actively warning them about using research grade materials?
I'm not aware of specific communications. However, it's my general understanding that we have significant concerns about practicing and prescribing outside of the scope of FDA-approved products.
FDA is not always right, but I just wanted to make sure you're aware that that's some of the communication.
I appreciate that. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Gretchen Wade. Oh, I'm sorry. I gotta look down to my left here. Look to my left. I'm always looking to the right here because he's. Any questions for more? I know. Any more questions? All right. Thank you, Maura.
Thank you very much.
Almost did it again to you.
Yes.
So where were we at? Gretchen Wade.
Good morning, members of the committee.
Good morning.
My name is Attorney Gretchen Wade, and I'm here to offer my support on behalf of Granite Bio Innovation for HB 1734. I will give you a brief background about me personally. I am the eldest daughter of a woman who died of metastatic breast cancer at the age of 44, leaving behind a 12-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 6-year-old. So this is both professionally and personally relevant to my life. Ultimately, Engineers and science innovators are trying to give individuals like my mother and others hope that there is something beyond what lives in the four corners of a document currently, or what is currently advisable under medical care. It would provide brick and mortar facilities in New Hampshire where patients could go and receive care. Previously or currently, people are going overseas who are very wealthy and can afford that. Maybe folks are flying to Florida or Montana because these laws exist there. Instead, we could be innovators and leaders in New Hampshire and bring these therapies here. This is happening. This is the future. We can either kick this can down the road or be leaders in it. So I welcome any questions.
Great, thank you, Gretchen. Any questions? Senator Prentice, I got you.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. It's Gretchen, correct?
It is, yes.
So I just, for the organizations that you represent, want to just ask this question. We're able to put this into play in the FDA phase 1, okay, which is very small. It could be a very small population of people, and not with any proven safety. I mean, what's your position on that?
So I guess
worth the risk.
Are you saying that instead of something that's gone through a clinical phase 1 trial, we're giving a drug directly to the patient?
I'm looking at FDA phase 1, so it's a small window.
For individuals that are dying and have no other option, they would be willing to ask for this. It's a may, not a shall. So that's important in the legal framework. It's not that you must take this drug. It's not that it's foisted upon you. Other individuals have spoken saying that they're willing to take it. I'm sure there's a patient population that would say, you know what, I have lived a really great life. I'm satisfied with the treatment that I've received, and I'm not interested in something that's new or novel. I'm not comfortable with that. I think patients make those decisions every single day on less novel topics. So if it's something that someone would like to elect for themselves with the right understanding from the medical community, from their primary practitioner or for others, and saying, hey, you know what, there's this great pop-up in the mill yard now. They've been functioning for about 5 years. Instead of having a knee replacement, we can inject gene therapy into your knees. And from your own genetic makeup, you no longer need knee replacements. You have something that Epibone is offering for individuals. So it's not something where, in the past, I think there was comfort. There was comfort in it's past clinical 1, or, it's in phase 2, and I know I'm not getting a placebo. I think that there was probably comfort. This probably feels a little bit uncomfortable because it's something new. That's what science does. It's innovative. We are on the cusp of that innovation, and if a patient decides that they are interested in that, why would the legislature stand in their way?
Okay. Thank you very much. Public trust.
I think he's outside. Maybe push him to later. All right. Let's see. Let's go with John Clemente. Todd White or John Clemente?
Sorry, just give me 1 second.
Are you John or Todd?
John.
All right, you're John. All right, we're still waiting on Todd. I will tell you, John, before your timer starts, we just discourage you reading testimony, because if you want to submit the testimony, you can send it to us and we'll all get it. You've got a timer going. You're going to have a timer in a minute. And I want to get you to get the most use out of your time. So if you want to summarize what your statement was, have at it.
Sure. Thank you. So I should have 3 minutes, correct?
Yep, 2.5 today.
Okay, I'll go faster. Thank you. So my name is John Clementi. I'm here representing myself. An AI healthcare entrepreneur here in the state of New Hampshire, and I'm here because this is personal to me. My mother passed away because of metastatic breast cancer, and my experience with the healthcare system took me on my journey to where we are today. And my view on this legislation is that it is modernizing to catch up the state of New Hampshire to where the FDA is. I know there's been some talk about New Hampshire versus Montana and other states in terms of what they do in terms of regulation, but the FDA has an extraordinarily high approval rate of single-use INDs and other things like compassionate use. I think this legislation is needed for is to kind of make sure that New Hampshire doesn't accidentally say no in a specific case, like so a mother of 4, like mine, in New Hampshire that has breast cancer, is triple negative, identifies a clinical trial ongoing for a TIL therapy in, say, Houston, that's approved for melanoma, but is trying to get approved for breast cancer. Instead of having to, you can't move with 4 kids to Houston to undergo the trial, et cetera. This legislation would make it easier for her to have that therapy here and to participate here in the state. As for example, of an already existing therapy pathway where New Hampshire would simply be modernizing to catch up where the federal government is, in my view. There's a lot to be said in terms of what can be done with AI and biologics and med device as well, that are standard pathways where, again, New Hampshire would be intentionally getting out of its own way, I guess.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions for John? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Todd White, did you come back here? All right, where we found you.
Well, good morning. I'm Todd White. I'm here as the Managing Director of the Thallion Initiative. Our offices are in Boston. We're a not-for-profit research organization that works predominantly on age and age-related diseases. My comments this morning, and I'm here in support of the bill, are twofold. The first is that many of the biotech companies that you are going to hear from today obviously create a therapy, but there's a whole ecosystem that goes into producing these therapies in general. There's a lot of diagnostics, a whole care team that goes around a lot of these things. And it's important to recognize that this ecosystem is an opportunity for the state to upskill a lot of their medical practitioners and clinicians. The second part is an economic driver. Most of these therapies, if you think of something like a CAR T therapy for cancer, there's the actual biologics, the drug, but there's also a lot of extra support, diagnostic care, post-care. All of these things will contribute to New Hampshire from an economic standpoint because there's an entire support system required. So those were just 2 points that I thought I would break out. The third one, actually one final point, because I've heard this, is that a lot of these therapies are a small number of potential patients. So big pharma doesn't have the scale to actually get involved. So a lot of these therapies are for small patient groups, and because of that, it's only in this sort of an environment that they will have easy and affordable access. So that's my final point. I'm happy for questions.
Are there any questions from the senators? Senator Avar.
Thank you. I brought up, I don't know if you heard my earlier testimony about what happened in Nevada and the SWAT teams and the biolabs.
No, I had not.
I have a concern in the fact that if there's these experimental therapy centers, is there does this give cover to nefarious individuals that want to create their own biolab here in America? We've seen 2, one in Las Vegas. There was another place, but it's a concern. And about potentially rogue organizations coming in and developing stuff without oversight. I'm concerned about that.
Well, I would argue that, first of all, if that was the case, if you are talking about a rogue element, they could do that anywhere. They don't have to be in the state. you probably have better chance at identifying this in a place that has a regulatory framework where you're inspecting these things. You actually have an environment where people are checking on this stuff. I mean, beyond just the phase one, I mean, you're talking with clinicians, diagnostics, there's a whole process here. So I don't think the biolab, if you're talking truly a rogue agent, you're probably going to have more of a more sort of scrutiny here than you would in any other jurisdiction.
Oh,
Yeah.
So basically, the oversight, though, is like one physician, and I don't see a whole lot of oversight on this.
So I won't speak to the specifics of the bill because I think there's probably people that can better speak to it. I certainly know in cases, I'll use Montana as an example, there's still the ethics review process. There's still the need to sort of prove that what you're doing passes muster, even beyond the phase one. So I think, and I assume that something similar would be in place here as well. Because I don't think any clinician is going to want to provide any type of experimental treatment without, doing their homework. And I think that's part of that process.
Thank you. Any other questions from the senators? No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Trey Goff.
Thank you for the time today. I really appreciate it. I'm here speaking in support of this bill. My name is Trey Goff, and I work with a company called Prospera, as well as an organization called the Blueprint for America Coalition. And we advocate for creating places where innovative entrepreneurs can create solutions that allow for human flourishing, which is exactly what this particular legislation does. I want to first address something that's come up a few times, which is this Las Vegas example, to give a few kind of specific points on that. The first is that this occurred under the already existing legal and regulatory system, right? This occurred under FDA oversight, ostensibly in a state regulated by the FDA without similar legislation to what we're considering here. And the fact of the matter is that the facilities that would be created as a result of this legislation have to be approved and licensed by DHHS. They have oversight from the Scientific Review Board, which must include a licensed physician, clinicians with experience specifically in this kind of experimental treatment, and clinical trial oversight authorities. So we'll have a higher degree of oversight here than would be the case in an unregulated lab. In economics, there's this concept of informal markets, right? What happens is when you regulate a market too much and there's high demand for whatever the market does, the people that want to then participate in that market are forced into what's called the informal economy, right? And you do things like create underground labs instead of having oversight, such as what this particular legislation would create. In that particular example, that guy was just doing a bunch of illegal things. He was already indicted for fraud prior to even creating that facility that ended up getting raided. Two other key points I want to make really quickly. The first is that I want to bring us present to the actual real human cost of the fact that facilities like this do not exist and the existing regulatory system is failing. It costs over $2 billion to get a drug through the full FDA approval process. As a result of that, if you have a rare disease or the patient pool for the treatment of that rare disease, even if a pharmaceutical company has a drug that might work for it, it's simply not worth the cost. If you only have 10, 100, even a few thousand patients, so those people simply do not get treated. Further, this does not create some sort of Wild West scenario, as had been previously mentioned. There are similar, quite permissive and expansive regimes across the world. Japan has a system similar to this. In fact, they've created a brain cancer treatment therapy that is not available in the United States yet and does not have an FDA-approved equivalent. Australia allows doctors for severely ill patients to simply give patients unapproved or not yet approved treatments for their specific malady without even getting any approval whatsoever. They just notify the regulator afterward. So the idea that this creates a Wild West would mean Montana, Japan, Australia, and other countries are also Wild Wests. And this treatment centers would have allowed for saving someone like my mom. My mom has cystic fibrosis, and she has a drug that is helping her now, but her lung function is down quite low, and she won't get to see her grandkids graduate high school because that drug approval took so long, she lost an extra 20% of her lung function and has about a decade to live.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the senators? No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that was Trey. We're on Bradley English next.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Bradley English. Excuse me. I'm a fourth-year PhD candidate at the Department of Genetics at Harvard Medical School, and I'm speaking here today in support of this bill. There's a lot of things I feel like I could talk about with regards to the science and the biotech, but just hearing some of the counter arguments to the bill today, I kind of wanted to touch on those specifically first and foremost. Namely, this 20 people aspect of the phase 1 clinical trial, I feel like is a bit of a red herring. It costs millions of dollars to do each person, 1 to 4, to constantly assess and monitor. These are carefully included people based on the criteria of their medical biomarkers, their genetics. And if you want those to go longer, one of the best ways to do so is to have patients have access to these particular things, which would then give them us more access to data of long term that we would then have. And basically, these are, you could say, vulnerable populations. And I hear that, and free speech is free speech until it becomes a medicine that goes into someone's body. But I feel like that's also a bit of a herring because it's free speech to give someone else their free will in this particular instance, to give them the right to try. And if, this is a slippery slope fallacy is called a fallacy because we'll cross that bridge when we get there. And if it is communication and education for these patients who, doctors can say to them, don't let your 5 minutes on WebMD, overtake my 5 years of medical school. Some of those patients who I know have had debilitating diseases for a very long time, like multiple sclerosis, would say to them, don't let your 5 minutes on a bullet point of a slide in your class overtake my 5 decades of having this disease. So some of them know an awful lot about those things too and would like the right to try. Thank you. I'll take questions now.
Senator Avard.
So kind of a little conversation here we're having. I appreciate your testimony. So we recently passed bills for right to try in the past, and I feel as though there's that yes, we should allow these right to try new drugs that have not gone through the whole process with millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. So let them try it. But on the other hand, you cannot dismiss the fact that these bio places have to be under a greater scrutiny. Recently, we talked about the Nevada thing in LA and all that, right? That doesn't just happen in a vacuum. There are Chinese students that were flown over, right, that had bioweapon material that was in Michigan or Minnesota, one of those up there. You got to keep that into perspective as we're processing this. Yes, there's a good thing that you're trying to do, but there's also this malevolent thing that has been happening. 2 bioplants and students bringing over bioweapon material to affect our crops and whatnot. Can this facilitate them using what we intend to do right here as a way to weaponize these centers? That's in the back of my mind, and I can't dismiss that. How do you deal with this in the process of this bill? There's something good we're trying to do.
I think it brings it into the light. This is the hypothesis I'll put on the table. I can't say that I'm a super intelligent AI that will iterate every single point underneath it to perfect scrutiny, but the evidence that I've seen for certain things like this, for kids, for instance, that get themselves involved with something like, say, marijuana at a young age, they would also then get associated with other things that exist because those people that are willing to do, marijuana or grow it or whatever would also be affiliated with incriminating activities, and it just puts them all into a same box, and those kids would be exposed to all sorts of things. But if instead this is something that you allow to happen, that's just the right to try, those same things are then being pushed into the market in the dark, that people who are willing to do even worse things that we don't have scrutiny over anymore and can say, is right to try now something that we're overseeing as best as we can? Do we have it in the white box in the light now? Do we have it in the spotlight? Where is it going? Let's keep an eye on it. Is not pushed into the darker box and all that into a situation with people who I believe, like you're mentioning, are these students. Who knows what they'd be willing to do, really? I mean, that this is maybe just their economic way to get money to do something worse. I don't know, but I hope that that's a bad thing, and I don't like it, and I'd like it to be as best as we can separated from this.
So the question,
Follow-up?
so the question is, how do we build in safeguards to prevent this from being abused? Because we do know, as a matter of fact, that there is a strategic thing going on here within countries. I've seen it over and over again where things were this is a great idea, and then it just, by nature, just turns bad.
Drifts away.
I'm concerned about the safeguards are, doctors can be bought, lawyers can be bought, judges can be bought, politicians can be bought, right? And so, we got a nice physician that is owned by China or Russia or Iran or somebody.
Sure.
And, we've got some technicians and they're going to be licensed. They're going to follow the rules until they don't. And now we have a system here with a very small amount of checks and balances. And that's my concern. It's a very small checks and balances. Great idea. Wonderful. But where are the safeguards? How do we protect the mass populations?
Yeah, I'm gonna preempt my statement by saying I don't have a legal background. That's not my expertise. I have a little embarrassing amount about politics.
No, it's just a conversation. That's all. It's just
No, for sure, certainly. But that being said, I'm actually going to pull from a statement from a doctor that his words specifically were expanded access is a case-by-case pathway. It doesn't create facilities, trained teams, reporting systems, and a sustainable clinical ecosystem. And he believed HB 1734 does. Those are his words. But I just come back to the slippery slope aspect. I think then there could be another bill after this if we find things going poorly in that direction. We don't know what's going to happen. And then let's get rid of it. Let's move it. Let's trash it because it's not working. But I feel like we can't push that domino over just because this domino here is somewhere else in my perspective. But I don't know everything.
Thanks for.
I appreciate you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, don't go anywhere. Any other questions from the senators? No, you're all set to go now.
Cheers.
Thank you. All right, Representative Polizov.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Yuri Polozov, representing Merrimack 10, Hooksett and Dumbarton. I'm here in support of this John Lewicki and Michael Yakubovich Experimental Treatment Centers Act. I want to add some personal note. Last week, I met with Honorable Michael Yakubovich. As many of you know, he's still fighting with cancer. We had federal right to try, New Hampshire right to try, but it's almost impossible to get on those programs. Medical facility had to be set up to provide it, but also it's like almost impossible intersection of you having to prove that you are terminally ill and will die to a certain date, but also showing signs of potential of survival and healing. Because no doctor wants to admit you to his experimental program knowing that you will certainly die. They want to show some progress, some help with the trial. So that's one major reason to support of this bill. I believe pages 3 and 4 where it talks about medical scientific review board and authorizing line 17 on page 4, authorizing commission of DHHS to adopt authorization procedures. I believe those would allow to provide security that you look against bioweapon centers, and generally being authorized and sometimes even within existing medical facilities, line 8 on page 4. So it will help us to review what's going on in these experimental medical centers. But if you want to add more security, more review, I'm in support of it, as well as line 6, page 5. I agree with Representative Weber. If we want to ask them to collect this, to maintain those records, not for 2 years, but for longer, I'm in support of that change. Thank you. Michael Yakubovich might not be able to benefit from it, but he's very appreciative of your work on medical access. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Representative. Any questions? No, thank you very much. And Representative, you sign up on the first sheet, I'll get you to talk quicker than making you wait. Sorry to make you wait there. Dylan Livingston.
Good morning, committee. Thank you for having me today. My name is Dylan Livingston. I am the founder and CEO of the Alliance for Longevity Initiatives. A4LI is a nonpartisan 501c4 nonprofit organization representing the longevity industry, the industry of biotech, tech, and healthcare that intends to help people live healthier and longer. And so we work with a lot of biotech companies, clinicians, investors, physicians, with this kind of ultimate goal in mind. And everything we do is really focused on the legislative side. The first thing I want to say is we would have had probably a dozen more companies outside if this wasn't scheduled, I think, with a week to get everything together. So I just want to point that out. And, if we have a little more prepare time, I think the outside will be overflowing. I'm going to try to be quick. What New Hampshire really is offering with this bill are options for patients and biotechs. In my line of work, what I see is a lot of patients who are aged or have a chronic and debilitating illness or terminally ill go abroad to get treatments that should be available here in America. They go to Central America, they go to Mexico, they go to Eastern Europe, where frankly the standard of care is much lower than what it would be here in New Hampshire. I anecdotally got sick when I was in Honduras, and I went to the clinic, and I couldn't speak the same language as the nurse, right? I don't want to put American patients in a situation where they are unsafe, and that is where they are ultimately heading, and we are providing a safer option here. The second thing is how this helps biotechs. What I also see in my line of work are really promising therapeutics, companies that have raised a Series A round and have completed a phase 1 trial, have tremendous animal data to back that this therapeutic actually works, but they can't raise $50 million, $100 million for a phase 2 trial. And so there's dozens, hundreds, thousands of really promising assets in therapeutics that are just sitting on the shelf. And that is potentially costing, not potentially, it is definitely costing lives. And so what this offers is a way for people, for companies to get their therapeutic into the hands of patients sooner and collect data to ultimately make the case to investors and regulators that this should be accelerated or expedited in its approval process. I had a bunch of other things I'll say. I'll stop there, but I guess the last thing I'll say is I'm personally open to changes. Senator Avard, I agree with you that, we don't want another weapons manufacturing center. That was horrifying when I saw it. And so I'm open to safeguards in place to prevent something like that from happening.
All right. Are there any questions from the senators? Senator Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. Now, your alliance nonprofit is out of where?
I live in Washington, D.C.
Washington,
or Virginia, Alexandria, technically.
Okay. And also is there data on the success rate with traveling out of country to get these testings?
No, not to my knowledge. And the reason is because they are going to back alley clinics in the middle of sketchy places, frankly. And I don't know how to say that more eloquently, but that's the truth, right? So these clinics, they don't capture the data. And that leaves the biotech industry and the biotechs offering these therapeutics kind of sitting in the dark.
And one more follow-up.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Are you aware of any experimental treatment center that has expedited FDA approval on any of these bio?
So no, because this whole concept is very new, right? Montana just passed a similar law to this less than a year ago. And so the ecosystem out there is being developed. From my perspective, I don't see this in the very short term being something that will encourage FDA to ultimately expedite the approval of a drug. But what I do see this doing is encouraging investors, right? And what I was talking about before is these phase 2 trials cost $100 million more, right? Phase 3s cost even more than that. And so, some anecdotal evidence, but collected evidence from a state like New Hampshire, would encourage these big, venture capitalists, these big institutional investors to back these small biotechs that otherwise can't get funding.
Very good. Thank you.
Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Chair Rochford, and thank you for taking my question. I think you've already answered it, but I just want to go back to it in your response to Senator Long. So by being able to maybe I use this phrase respectfully, skip over to a phase 2, you bring more investors into biotech organizations that are held back right now, and because they don't have the funding to get to the next level?
So you'll hear from other companies here today. No one intends to skip a phase 2. And the reason for that is because you need to go through phase 2 and phase 3 to ultimately get insurance coverage for your therapeutic. And that's where companies make money, right? And so there's no intention to stop after phase 1. What they want to do is use a pathway like this to generate the data that will get them further along in the process. And, right now, without this kind of regulatory landscape, that's not really possible.
Follow-up?
Yes.
So respectfully, I didn't think that you were saying you were going to skip phase 2 or phase 3, but it is to get from phase 1, where you may be held and need more investments, organizations that you represent need that. That's like pulling a gate back for them to move through to get investors and then to build their business.
To raise ultimately more money to fund the cost of these phase 2 and 3 trials. Yes.
Okay.
What I will say, actually, I answered your question, I think.
You did.
Yeah, I'll stop. Sometimes it's better to stop talking.
I was not suggesting skipping the other phases.
Yeah.
Looking for that place where you went from 1 to 2.
And I remember what I was going to say. And, this is not to say every company that comes to New Hampshire is going to get that investment, right? But what this will do is help weed out the best companies from the worst companies and direct that funding towards those companies and assets that are really promising.
Thank you.
Wouldn't the most, and I hesitate to use the word appropriate, but maybe wouldn't the most uniform approach to this to be approaching FDA for reforms on how drugs become available and can become available?
We're doing that too. Yeah.
Well, and I say that because Secretary Kennedy and I think you probably, given your organization, been on Rogan, was on Hims and Hers, talking about peptides and the use of peptides. And, I think that's, my opinion anyway, and my question to you is, would you agree? I think that would be a much more uniform approach to doing this than going around to 50 states and having 50 different sets of laws.
Sure. The one hand of candidly, I think you all in New Hampshire could appreciate this. The federal government is a bureaucratic nightmare, right? With a lot of layers. Look, we're trying, right? But I don't think I don't think the focus for FDA in my organization's mind is this right to try pathway. This should be, frankly, a states' rights issue for who and what can be tried in that state. What we're focused on in the FDA is incentivization pathways to support companies that are going through this FDA trial with like priority review vouchers and extended exclusivity time. That's a whole other debate. I can, share with you another time.
I'm sure we could spend a lot of time on that. Yes. Senator Ibar, did you have another question?
I did. I didn't want to, but I do. So what kind of safeguards does Montana have? Is this the exact same language as them? My huge concern is safeguards. And
Understandable.
I don't feel this does it.
From my understanding, this is similar to the Montana bill, but adopted for New Hampshire. What I would say is, when the Montana bill was being crafted, there was there was a lot of change in that law, right? Because people on committees had different ideas on how to make the law better, and so I encourage that. I want this to be a collaborative effort by the state government to ultimately make this bill as good as possible. So I encourage, safeguards, if you have, I'm sure we can probably come up with a few, maybe like a annual inspection or something like that. I would be totally open to that to ultimately alleviate some of this worry.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much, Dylan. I've got Rachel Lambert. I've got Ryan Lambert written in the same handwriting. Do you guys together or separate?
Separate.
All right.
It was a little tight.
All right, sounds good. Yeah.
Great.
Shall I begin?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Rachel Lambert. I'm a New Hampshire resident, entrepreneur, and community builder. I'm from Maine, attended UNH, and I live in Portsmouth. Throughout my career, I've worked in leading startup cities, including Boston, San Francisco, New York, and Miami. I've raised capital, and I've built software products that have brought more than 500,000 people together in in-person events. I'm now working to build up the startup community in New Hampshire, specifically for biotech startups. One thing I've seen over and over again is that many entrepreneurs are simply not familiar with New Hampshire. Everybody is talking about Florida and Texas, but they have not fully clocked that New Hampshire offers something rare: freedom, safety, natural beauty, proximity to Boston, and access to world-class medical institutions, all with the ability to build our own identity. This bill helped change that. Biotech founders especially send a signal that New Hampshire is open to responsible innovation and serious about becoming a place where important companies can relocate, grow, create jobs, and expand patient care. I'm familiar with the concerns of safety and unequal access. People worry whether access will only be for wealthy people or that this is the Wild West. It's not. These treatments are post-FDA phase 1 trials, physician supervised and consent-based for the patient. The truth is, wealthy patients already travel elsewhere, such as Prospera, a small island off the coast of Honduras, for treatment options. Less privileged New Hampshire residents cannot afford this kind of travel expense. And these are not simply nice to have vanity treatments. Many of these treatments can dramatically improve the quality of life for people with chronic and debilitating illnesses, but who are not yet on their deathbed. The current system is not equal. It simply makes access more expensive and farther away. A lawful, regulated pathway in New Hampshire could make these treatment options clearer, closer, and more affordable. If some patients with greater means are willing to go first, take the first risk, and help establish what works, that can be part of the path toward making treatment better and more accessible over time and fast-tracking the remaining phase trials in FDA. And more broadly, nearly every major innovation starts with first movers, and that can be New Hampshire. We do not need to wait for Massachusetts or other states or the FDA to start expanding care. And this is not theoretical for me. I'm actively working with biotech startups in places like Austin and San Francisco that are looking for places to safely operate in the US to offer patient treatments while growing their business.
If you've got written testimony you want to submit, you can give it to Cole and he'll make sure we get that.
Yes, I will submit that online because this has a lot of chicken scratch.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I would say, do any senators have any questions? Senator Long, do you have any questions? All right.
I can really clear a room.
Ryan Lambert.
I'll keep this short. Thank you very much for your time. My name is Ryan Lambert. I'm a New Hampshire resident and entrepreneur. While the rest of the country continues to let innovation be hamstrung in favor of regulatory capture by big pharma, New Hampshire has an opportunity to show how fast innovation can go and how many more treatments can be created when you allow people to choose a level of risk not otherwise permitted by the FDA. And let's be clear, if it's past FDA 1, it's safe. So what people are wasting is money on, like in the worst case, they're wasting money on vitamins or the equivalent of fillers. People are already seeking experimental treatments. They're just doing it outside of the United States along with their dollars. These bills don't create this behavior. They bring it into New Hampshire. That's it. I recommend 1734 as ought to pass. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Ryan. Any questions? Thank you very much. Joshua Berg. Going once. Well, we'll go to Noah Keating while we're waiting for Joshua.
Hello. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have some notes, but these are my own words. My name is Noah Keating. I represent EpiBone, which is a clinical stage biotech company. We grow bone and cartilage implants from a patient's own stem cells, which is personalized lab-grown tissue for skeletal reconstruction. We hold the first and second FDA INDs ever issued for tissue-engineered bone and cartilage products, and we manufacture here in New Hampshire at Army BioFab in Manchester under Air Force research grants. You've heard today about the cost of going through FDA trials, and less than 10% of biotech startups make it through. Our company has an additional challenge in that it's hard for the FDA to classify because it's not quite a biologic, it's not a medical device, it's actually tissue that is grown in a lab and implanted in your body. So that means even by the slow standards of the FDA, ours is even slower, and the FDA is still trying to figure out how to work with us. So a couple of years ago, that process nearly killed our company. We went from 40 employees to 4. And to keep the company alive, we moved to the United Arab Emirates to try to find a regulatory regime that could work with us. In Abu Dhabi, we found that, and we found regulators who were willing to talk to us and sit with us. But while we were there, we noticed that each of the 7 emirates in the United Arab Emirates has their own regulatory authority, and they compete with each other. And when we came back to the US, we saw that same dynamic happening on the state level. New Hampshire, Montana, and Florida, states are creating their own frameworks where the federal system has stalled out. So these laws gave our company a path forward. They allowed me to still be sitting here and talking to you about EpiBone and the wonderful work we're doing. They're the reason we came back and we're building here in this country again. Last time I testified about this, I was asked about why Boston isn't doing this. Boston's right there. And I think the answer is that Boston has a lot of big pharma, and big pharma benefits from the current system, and there's not much incentive to change it. New Hampshire is in a different position. You have the opportunity to be on the side of small pharma, companies with fewer than 10 people like ours, mom and pop shops trying to bring genuinely new therapies to patients. We already manufacture in Manchester, and this bill would allow us to deliver those products to Granite Staters. It connects the work that's already happening here to the patients who could benefit from it. Bills like this are how you innovate. It's good for New Hampshire, it's good for America, and I urge your support.
Great, perfect timing, Noah.
Thank you.
Any questions? All right, thank you very much.
Could I add one more thing?
You got to make it quick.
All right, there was a question about like expedite FDA approval and expedited, and I just want to say, like, we are in the process of going to market in Florida under these right to try laws, and there is a process by which real world data is collected from patients who are getting these treatments. And the tools are such now that there's AI tools that did not exist a few years ago that can collate that data and actually expedite real FDA submissions to phase 2 and phase 3 with the data that is collected from the patients that are served under these laws.
Thank you. All right, Joshua Berg, there you go.
Thank you. I'm Josh Berg, a researcher at Vincere Biosciences, where we are developing treatments for Parkinson's and other diseases of aging by improving mitochondrial function. I'm driven by how expanding our understanding of age-related diseases can translate to a profound impact on patients' lives. Today, you've heard from many of our industry leaders about how the proposed bill can continue to position New Hampshire as a leading state for biotechnology development and healthcare access. As a member of this research community, I want to emphasize how this can impact the choices of young people like me who are deciding where and how to continue their careers. I think that the community focused on researching and translating longevity biotechnology is a particularly mobile, dedicated, and growing workforce. While this industry continues to grow around the country, there still remain a few hubs that stand out as particularly strong ecosystems from which to translate basic research into companies and treatments. As someone building a career in this field, one of my top priorities is to engage fully with these hubs and to learn from brilliant researchers focused on similar questions to my own. Attracting the group of researchers you've heard from today through dedicated treatment centers can make New Hampshire even more of a destination for recent graduates. Now, the bill you are considering builds on New Hampshire's momentum in a way that matters particularly for diseases of aging. Growing this ecosystem in the aging and longevity spaces in New Hampshire would make this even more of an ideal destination for researchers who know that they want to focus on this field in particular and who want to collaborate alongside others with similar goals in an environment that prioritizes safe and effective patient access. This bill promotes New Hampshire not only as a place for patients to access life-changing treatments, but also as a destination for biologists to work to bring these technologies out of the lab and into patients' hands. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions from the committee.
All right, thank you, Jocelyn. Any questions? No. Thank you very much. Eric Morgan. Eric Morgan. No. Sarah Scott. Okay. And Eric is the last person I have signed up. All right, we'll get to you after Eric. I apologize. Eric? Yes, come on in. All right, Eric, you're up.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for giving me time to speak. I'm Eric Morgan. I am a resident of New Hampshire. I am also a co-founder and chief operating officer at BioAge Labs, a public biotech company. We are developing a pipeline of therapies at BioAge via an FDA-regulated route. So we have been involved in those kinds of trials for a number of years. And I'm speaking on my own behalf as in terms of the company, because of our focus on the standard FDA regulated route, this particular pathway does not have direct relevance to the company's business model. So in that context, I am impartial. But I believe personally from my experience in biotech that, that this bill would be very beneficial to patients and to New Hampshire. And what I wanted to talk about primarily was innovation and development of new therapies. Just to speak from the perspective of someone, experienced in running small companies and developing new therapies, there is a great need for small companies developing innovative therapies to be able to test whether their drugs are effective or not in people. And there are many companies whose therapies never are able to be tested in people simply because they don't have the money to run the extremely expensive trials that the FDA requires. And so there's a great opportunity for a venue where patients can fund their own trials to enable companies to get really critical early patient data on things like what's the biological effect of the drug and whether it's effective to enable them to raise more money to eventually go the bigger route. And so this may not be something that's obvious to everyone, but this is a great boon to innovation and therefore new therapies for people who don't have therapies, for companies to be able to do this kind of route. And I think for New Hampshire, there's a great opportunity here being so close to Boston to take advantage of that biotech hub potential to be able to facilitate this kind of innovation for small companies and innovative therapies.
All right, thank you, Eric. Are there any questions from the committee? No, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Stephen Martin. You put your name down, but you didn't check the right box. So that's why, but we got you now. That's all right, now you know. And that's the last speaker I have signed up.
So I'm going to speak today a little bit on the economics, but I do hope you will also take the opportunity to grill me on some of your earlier questions, Senator Prentice, as I think I could provide some valuable context. My name is Stephen Martin, and I work with Infinita, where I am responsible for our commercial rollout under the Right to Try law in Montana. My work primarily involves sourcing biotech and clinical partners in order to provide patients with a broader variety of treatment options. Today, I'm going to use my 2 minutes to run you through some of the math, which explains why under laws like these, we can make treatments that would normally cost thousands of dollars available for less than 30. Drug approval is an expensive process. For a biotech to go all the way through the 10-year clinical approval pipeline, they usually need to shell out about $1 billion. It also costs them time, which eats into their patent life. They can apply for a patent extension, but this is only about 5 years, which means even after approval, they only regain about half of the patent life that they lost during the process. Now, the investors are not providing the $1 billion that the biotech needs out of the goodness of their heart. They need to make a return. For our math, we can assume an average required return of about 20%. If we then take an average drug, which we assume does about 1/5 of the volume of Humira as a baseline, that'll be treating about 18,000 patients per year. Now, if we take these figures and divide that $1 billion cost over the remaining 13 years of patent life after the clinical pipeline, and then we further divide that by the 18,000 patients per year treated, we can actually arrive at an estimated number that we need to recoup on our treatment in order to get back our $1 billion investment plus the required 20% margin. That number, which must be passed on to patients, is $4,889. Now, if we consider the same treatment, which helps the same 18,000 people per year, but is made available for patients after the 2-year phase 1 clinical trial costing about $6.6 million, we can do the exact same math, the exact same formula, and we reach a per patient required return of $24. That is a 200x decrease in cost. Now, that massive gap is why you can see that under these state programs, sometimes treatments are available at a substantially reduced price. We are able to bring these treatments to patients a lot cheaper. And I'll just finish this off by saying that when I say we, I am not speaking about some hypothetical third party. My job is to source treatments primarily in oncology for use in Montana. I will come here and provide these treatments to these patients at these price levels if this law is passed.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of the committee? Senator Prentice, I predicted that one.
Oh, and well, I'm not preparing to grill you, but I just,
Yeah,
I wanted to just hone in because I had left quickly. You've been doing work in Montana?
Yes.
You know Montana and Florida, and then there's New Hampshire, okay?
So I don't work in Florida.
Experience.
Yeah, I don't work in Florida or Utah under their stem cell
But you're working in
bills.
Montana.
Yes. So my job is I work with a local hospital chain called Benefits. It's the largest hospital chain in the state, and we've been tapped to source treatments for them for use for their upcoming right to try facility in oncology, heart disease, neurodegenerative, and a broad bucket of kind of healthy aging, which is like arthritis, high blood pressure, really anything that gets worse as you get older.
Follow up?
Yes.
So, thank you. So the right to try, you refer to it as a right to try facility.
It's an experimental treatment center.
Okay,
It is the language is the same. Yeah.
No, and that's fine, but so that is not up and running yet in a way where there's data that's been collected and evidence that can be brought to bear here?
Not in terms of the patient experience. I can tell you a lot about what kind of treatments that we're seeing like already expressing interest. The work that we're doing at this point is setting things up for after the Department of Health in Montana opens up licensing, right? So we're sort of doing a like preparatory commercial rollout. In terms of what treatments you're going to see, though, I will tell you that it is very heavily weighted towards cancer. One specific kind of treatment that I think is a really good example of where these laws kind of fix a gap in the federal pathways is personalized cancer vaccines. So there are entire genres of treatment, entire treatment areas where you can take a biobank sample of a person's tumor tissue and actually genetically edit it so that when you put it back into them after a successful surgery or after radiation treatment, it can kind of train their immune system to recognize the tumor. And this is not used to actually destroy the cancer while you're first undergoing treatment. It's used to reduce the likelihood of recurrence after a successful surgery. Now, one of the problems with this that makes this effectively impossible to access under existing right to try laws is that by the time you've had the successful surgery, you're no longer terminal, right? You're not going to die in the next 6 months, which is how that is defined in the law. But the problem is, like, you could become terminal again at any moment. This is a preventative medicine designed to reduce the likelihood of that happening to you in the future. And so we have actual patients right now who are effectively waiting for licensing to open up in Montana to access some of these personalized cancer vaccines that we've already sourced. Some of them even already have tissue that is biobanked. And by the way, I would also love to have a chance to talk about some of the safety standards regarding some of the biolab concerns, if it's something you'd like to ask about. But that's just the kind of thing that you can expect to see a lot of out here in New Hampshire. These are the sort of treatments where this new language and this new structure provides alternatives for patients who literally cannot access these under any other existing law in the country.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Problem.
With that, I'm closing the hearing on 1734. Yeah, open the hearing on House Bill 1735. I'll ask the prime sponsor to introduce his bill.
Whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, State Representative Brian Cole, Hillsborough 26 out of Manchester. HB 1735 is to clarify and expand the scope of New Hampshire's right to try framework. To help you understand the bill, I'd like to speak about an ambitious plan for economic growth in our state. Last year, Governor Ayotte signed what is now RSA 126-Z, a revolutionary law that went into effect January 1st. This new law makes New Hampshire the best legal jurisdiction in the country for access to experimental therapies for people with life-threatening illnesses. Among other things, we are the first state to allow dying patients to undergo a robust civil liability waiver to receive experimental therapies. We are also the first state to enact right to try protections that do not require passing a phase 1 clinical trial. As a result, the economic growth is already beginning. You can see that by the number of cutting-edge experimental biotech companies who have come here today to testify before you on support of this bill. They represent exactly the kind of innovation and growth that we want to bring to this state. They are part of the New Hampshire advantage. I'm in touch with a large biotech company right now who's actively looking for lab space in Manchester as a result of the work that this committee did on 126Z last year. Although our whole country is entering a revolutionary new era of biotechnology, countless legal and policy failures are thwarting the development of this promising industry. I'm not exaggerating when I say that New Hampshire is the best state in America to create an experimental biotech hub through innovative legislation. Cambridge, Mass. Is now the largest biotech hub in the world, and New Hampshire is the most legally innovative state in New England. We also have substantial biotech infrastructure already emerging in downtown Manchester with the Army contract. New Hampshire could recreate its entire current gross domestic product by establishing a US-based hub for experimental biotech, all with relatively small amount of office space. This would be about $125 billion per year, treating the most grave medical conditions. Even a conservative estimate is that we stand to attract tens of billions of dollars in business for New Hampshire. This bill will clean up and expand our existing right to try framework. This bill is going to do two things. First, we will add clarity to our law with some housekeeping changes informed by extensive discussions with the industry. These changes will clean up some statutory loose ends to make the law easier for innovators to understand. Secondly, This bill would extend protections in 126Z to people with chronic and debilitating conditions, using a well-established definition taken from FDA regulations. That means you don't need to be dying to get New Hampshire's protections. You can also be in severe pain with no FDA-approved treatment. Let me give you an example so you can see what I'm describing. You already heard from one of the companies that's here today, they're EpiBone, who are doing some of the most incredible innovative research in the state. EpiBone uses bioreactors to grow grafts of bone or cartilage from your very own stem cells, allowing people with grave deformities or injuries to resume a normal quality of life. In every state but Florida, there is no feasible legal framework for EpiBone's business. If they went through the standard FDA model, they would need to complete a separate clinical approval process for all the couple hundred bones that are in the human body. It's really the process itself that should be approved. Right now, we are essentially sending these companies across the Atlantic to the Gulf states, and more recently, Florida, which has a successful new right to try framework for non-fetal stem cells. EpiBone's customers are desperate to get these improvements that these companies can offer, and we in New Hampshire can provide it. Last year, expanded right to try frameworks were still new. I remember there were some questions about whether they could really work. You can see that's no longer a question. As many of these companies here will tell you, businesses are actively migrating to Montana and Florida because those states have created workable alternatives to the existing federal regulatory pathway. In the short time the 126Z has been in place, the law has created a great deal of interest in New Hampshire from across the country. Although we have the best law in the nation for people with life-threatening diseases, we have no special protections to allow grafts, gene therapy, or other treatments for people who have severely debilitating conditions, such as deformities, that fall short of meeting our strict definition of life-threatening. This bill represents a well-thought-out plan, an opportunity for New Hampshire, informed by many of the companies behind me, to revolutionize the quality of life for citizens and patients who come to New Hampshire for treatment. New Hampshire can become the brain trust of this industry, and something I'd like to see happen.
Questions from the committee? Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Weber?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Still Representative Weber, representing Cheshire 5. And all of that sounded wonderful, but what you need to do is read this bill very carefully. If all it were doing were extending the right to try that we extended to terminally ill patients last year to those who are living with severely chronic debilitating diseases, that would be one thing. I still had some problems with the provisions, but what this bill does is it removes all the guardrails that we put in place for the protection of those terminally ill patients. And it removes them not only for the chronically ill patients, but for the terminally ill as well. So they're opening up a great deal of potential abuse because there is no longer going to be a requirement that the patient has tried or is not eligible for an FDA-approved treatment. There will be no requirement that they're ineligible for clinical trials. It appears not to require the informed consent that was in there but has been stricken. It allows the physician providing access to be paid by the manufacturer as well as by the patient. So what could possibly go wrong there? And it appears to remove the requirement that there was a successful phase 1 trial. So it really is removing a lot of guardrails. The second thing is that the definition section on page 2 for a qualifying severe illness is a drafting nightmare. It starts on line 5, says qualifying severe illness is an illness that's both chronic and debilitating. And then it says that chronic and debilitating shall have the same meaning as severely debilitating, and it refers to the Code of Federal Regulations. If what you want is the definition from the Code of Federal Regulations, you could strike all of that and simply say, for purposes of this section, severely debilitating means diseases or conditions that cause major irreversible morbidity, because that's the actual definition. So if that's the definition you want, you ought to be putting those words in this statute. But it doesn't open up huge amounts of time for other people. I simply would just add that patients can be required to pay for treatment. It's no longer limited to the costs associated with the treatment. So the sky is the limit as to what they can be charged. And finally, it really limits the accountability. You've heard me say that before, but it's still a problem. And it preys on vulnerable patients. So with that, I will conclude. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Representative. So can you send us language for executing if it needs to be?
I will certainly do that, Senator. Should I send that to your attention or to the entire committee or?
Us.
Okay, gotcha.
Is Representative Cole still here? Did he leave? Thank you. Representative Lucas. I'm sorry.
Hello.
I'm gonna ask you one other question. Okay. All right. Thank you. You have the floor.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Once again, Janet Lucas representing Grafton County District 7. I want to raise one concern, maybe amplify something that Representative Weber said about the potential for double dipping. Physicians who are employed by a so-called experimental treatment center would not only be paid for providing access to care, but potentially also being paid by the manufacturer of said treatment device, biologic. The American Medical Association's position is that physicians must not accept payment for referring patients to research studies, as this is considered unethical. This bill would also prevent disciplinary action by the state medical board from participating in what is clearly double dipping. Also, later in this bill, should it be enacted, experimental treatment center physicians can offer telemedicine. And these services can be offered to any patient who's been diagnosed by a physician with a terminal or qualifying severe illness in any state or jurisdiction. The state of New Hampshire would be charged then with developing and enforcing a new parallel system of regulations, incompatible potentially with the FDA, and somehow beyond the reach of legal action by these other states and jurisdictions. My testimony, I think, for this bill was attached to the testimony for the previous one. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. Questions? I do. I have a question. Where do you see the double dipping?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Where is the double dipping allowed? On what line, what page?
It's here.
Senator Prentice, you have it?
Yeah, may I,
Yeah.
Representative Lucas, may I help you out a little bit here?
Yeah, thank you.
This is where I'm looking at that refers back to something that Representative Weber said I think might help us get there. So are we talking about on page 2, starting on line 23 under 126Z:2? It starts, and then there's section 1A. It starts to talk about what can be provided, you know, a drug, a biologic, or a device being provided to a patient without receiving compensation, but also later talks about being able to provide this to a particular clinical trial or study. This is, if I'm reading this correctly, which the trial or study would be run by somebody who, what we want is someone who is a licensed medical professional. Is that where you're going with this? And
Yeah, thank you for that. What I'm concerned about is that it would encourage the practice. And there are ethical reasons why that shouldn't happen.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Any further questions? One more. The previous, I should have asked her, as far as the informed consent, that has been taken out of, are you familiar with that?
Yes, on page 1, it's striked, and it's line 13, so it would be no Roman numeral 1-D.
Got you. Thank you. Seeing no further questions? Representative Kofal here? Is there another representative? Any other representatives in the room that wanted to comment on this? Okay. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Aiden, oh, I messed up your name again. Aiden, right there.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Aydin Gökçe. I'm here to testify again in support of HB 1735. I previously testified in support of HB 1734. So as I previously explained, our company has a process that's similar to IVF that installs and corrects genetic variants that cause debilitating and chronic genetic disease. And our patients are prospective parents that are carriers for genetic disease variants. And based on genetic sequencing, you can be sure that their child is guaranteed to have a debilitating genetic disease. However, they're not suffering yet. They're not terminal yet. By the time the child is born and the child is terminal, it is too late. And that is why we think 1735 is a step in the right direction. It extends the scope of treatment from terminal to chronic and debilitating. That would help expand the scope to the kinds of clients that we're interested in treating. These patients have no other options. The only options they have are after the disease is manifested and caused irreversible damage. There are ways of potentially increasing life expectancy, but nonetheless, not by very much. And so telling families that are looking for care options today under HB 701 that was signed into law by Governor Ayotte, that the law offers them nothing, in our opinion, is not defensible. We believe that they should have options to prevent disease that is genetically guaranteed without having to wait until they're on their deathbed to be eligible for these treatments. And with that, I strongly urge the committee to support HB 1735, and I'm open to take any questions.
Any questions? No, thank you.
Thank you.
Aubrey, you've been here a long time. We'll get you up next here.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, Aubrey Friedman, I live in Bridgewater. I speak in support of this bill. Last year we had the right to try bill, and I thought that was great. I supported it, and this bill is adding to that in a good way. Why should we want it? I think the intent was to help people who were terminally ill to get a chance to survive. Why people who aren't at that stage yet, but they have a serious medical problem, pain, chronic disease, whatever it is, and why shouldn't they get the same chance to have a better quality of life? I think that's critical here. I think they deserve it. Secondly, when it comes to offering these drugs or medical device that the FDA hasn't approved yet, but there's no comparable alternative available. Who should decide if this should be offered to a patient with this disease or chronic problem? Should it be the doctor who works with that patient, or should it be a medical bureaucrat? I mean, to me, I think it should be the doctor, and the patient should be able to take a look at this, and is this something, make it available. If it's not available, they don't even want to be able to give the doctor a choice. And I think the doctor has a better, is closer to the problem and obviously closer to the patient. And then my last point is on this issue about paying for treatment for the device or the drug, whatever it might be, is viewed as somehow unethical. I view this differently. If the patient is suffering and they have the money to pay for this, and it's not required, but it is, maybe they'll be able to access it if they're going to pay for it themselves. Why is it wrong for them to pay for it? If they prioritize a better quality of life rather more than paying some money, I say let them do it. They're not a baby. They should be able to decide what is your priority. And if they so choose, then I say let them. They're not a baby, and they should be able to pay for it if they want it. And those are the reasons I support the bill.
Thank you, Aubrey. Senator Abart has a question for you.
Aubrey, would you be amenable for, it's struck out with written informed consent.
I noticed that. I'm okay with putting that back in. Why not? We should always have fully informed consent. So I say you could put that in, and it's good. It should be there.
Yeah. Thank you. That's it.
Any questions? No. Thank you. Thank you, Aubrey.
Thank you.
Nancy Biederman.
Third time's the charm. Nancy Biederman, I'm a parent representative of the New Hampshire Rare Disease Advisory Council. I am speaking for myself. Most rare diseases are not labeled fatal, but they have comorbidities, or as I like to call the extra side effects that can often lead to your death. As a parent of a rare disease child and also a type 1 diabetic parent, I will tell you it is always in the back of my head as to what can and will possibly happen with my children. One of the rare diseases in my family is a allergy to the cold. And you might think, oh, that's not too bad. Well, it is, because it can be fatal because of anaphylaxis. From her just jumping into the water and trying to be like all the other kids, or even just simply walking into an air-conditioned room, they can go into anaphylaxis. Also, just being caught in a rainstorm can end up having that anaphylaxis start. And if you don't happen to have your EpiPen or even be able to get emergency aid immediately, that's it. A lot of, as I've already said, rare diseases aren't diagnosed for over 10 years. And so as you're trying to figure out what's going on, some of the medical procedures, treatments that are done on you can cause lifelong chronic illnesses and also lead to your death. Many of them are related to the GI system. For many rare disease patients, they're placed on feeding tubes. And because their connective tissue, their muscles, their swallowing ability is not there anymore, or their stomach and their intestines aren't able to absorb nutrition as anyone else. Medical nutrition is not the same as eating. It's a way to survive, but not really. And then you worry about the fact that you're not able to swallow, and you can asphyxiate and die from asphyxiation because either you're trying to learn to swallow again, or even just trying to swallow your spit can lead to asphyxiation and then pneumonia, and then you end up dying from this. So I do agree we do need to put informed consent back into this bill. And I will let you know that even with type 1 diabetics, We are being held up on islet cell transplants right now because they're considering it as a prescription or a medicine versus an organ transplant. So there are bills in the federal government right now. We are being held up. Asia is ahead of us. They are curing type 1 diabetes. We are not in the United States. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Nope, seeing none. Maura Weston.
Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Maura Weston, and once again, I'm here this morning on behalf of the New Hampshire Medical Society, which is a nonprofit association of nearly 2,000 physicians and healthcare clinicians. And our organization's mission is to advocate for the well-being of our patients, for our profession, and the betterment of public health in New Hampshire. And it is with this in mind that we are here in opposition today to 1735. While we are most surely sympathetic to all patients facing chronic and debilitating illness, we stand by and support the importance of patient safety and upholding evidence-based protocols and practice and the ethical foundations of the practice of medicine. The shift that this bill proposes to the focus from terminally ill to chronic or debilitating illness may give patients false hope. It could open the doors to drugs that have not completed rigorous testing. Frankly, it could lead to exploitation, charging patients potentially high costs for ineffective or potentially dangerous treatments. There was some conversation earlier about 126Z2. Again, relevance to manufacturers, being able to both manufacture and provide drugs and devices. We view this as problematic. Further, 126Z3, again, removes really liability, removes the authority of the Board of Medicine. That too is problematic from our standpoint. We also take very seriously the importance of informed consent. We question whether someone in these circumstances can truly, if informed consent can truly be obtained when this type of treatment is sought. We have concerns that this might undermine the timely accumulation of data by diverting patients when data is so important to clinical trials to prove effectiveness. Beyond this, it appears that there's no process in place for the collection of information on outcomes or adverse events, and we believe that that is a detriment to our patients and the public health of New Hampshire. So we ask that you recommend this bill inexpedient to legislate. And I would just comment that our opposition of 1735 obviously builds on and is supported by our opposition to 1734 and 1117, which have taken together throw open the gates to really an alternative healthcare regime without guardrails in New Hampshire. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maura. Is there any other questions? No, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman, is this the last bill that we're doing today?
No, we still have another bill after this.
And we're getting kicked out at what time?
12:30 at the latest. So we will have to recess. Yeah. Gretchen Wade.
Good morning again, committee members, Attorney Gretchen Wade. I wanted to just reiterate something that I might not have clarified in my morning testimony. I live here, I'm from here, I work here, and I'm an attorney in Manchester, so not someone that's flown in from someplace else. Just wanted to clarify something that I think is an important drafting piece. I know we're short on time. If you look at page 3, lines 25 to 27, written informed consent for the use of the drug, biologic, or device if the patient is a minor or lacks the mental capacity to provide informed consent, a parent or legal guardian has given written informed consent on the patient's behalf. And if the patient is an legal adult, the consent is not contrary to the prior documented wishes of the patient. So the legal conformed consent piece is in there. I just thought I would start with addressing that. Yes. Page 3. Line 25 to 28. It's just no longer redundant. in two separate places. So this was a lot of just removing vestigial language that is confusing for individuals to read who are not attorneys. Certainly, I'm not advocating for everyone to go to law school. Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your testimony. On the written informed consent, there's some of the words have changed. Investigational drug, that's investigational is omitted. And also,
Do you mind pointing me to what page you're referring to?
I'm referring to the first page that was deducted D. So it's written informed consent for the use of investigational drug, biological product, investigational, and I believe biological is, use of,
Yes.
yeah, so I'm wondering why those words would be deleted. Does
So
it expand it more?
And I think that that was purposeful. Certainly from the prior bill 701 to where we are today, I think that's the exact purpose of why you have individuals in front of you. It's expanding beyond just investigational treatment, which that definition in and of itself is being deleted to help clarify. So what might not be considered an investigational drug therapy, and certainly you can speak to some of the scientists here, that it's broadening the scope, helping to broaden the scope.
Just to follow up, if I may, in your opinion, is it a benefit to the patient?
For the patients that would like to advocate for this for themselves, why not?
That would like to know exactly the biological or the investigatory. Does that help them knowing that?
That would be a conversation with their provider and then probably whoever they're going to refer them to in the biotech community space. They're certainly going to meet with someone there who's going to explain, are we treating your kneecap? Are we treating your brain? Are we treating your spine? They're not going to all of a sudden show up at a cancer therapy center when they're looking for knee replacement, gene therapy, or stem cell therapy. So I think the patient in and of itself knows what they need for treatment. This is just broadening this for more individuals so that you don't have to be on death's door before you take advantage of scientific advancements.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Not being compensated directly by the infraction. That seems to be an ethical issue with the previous.
Sorry, do you mind telling me what page you're on? Page 2.
No, line, that's what, line, the first page. And under 13, so it'd be line 17 and 18, that was struck. I don't want to. Thank you.
Sure.
Can you hear me all right?
I understand that that is there. While I have not done a legal analysis on that, and with that caveat, there's still anti-kickback statutes at the federal government. So I don't think that we're going to create kind of what you saw for like a pay-for-play with the opioid crisis here. We have pretty strict regulations regarding that, anti-kickback, and I'm sure any U.S. attorney just across the street would be happy to take that case.
Okay, thank you.
I also wanted to briefly mention, just as a reminder, patients have the burden to bring medical malpractice cases currently against providers in the state. It's a relatively high burden. So I know that in the House, there was a lot of conversation about immunity provision and what that would do to patients, and it would back them up to a corner and they wouldn't be able to advocate for themselves. Currently, it is the patient's burden to bring those cases against a provider in the state. That wouldn't change under this framework. They still are required to advocate for themselves. If this bill goes nowhere, does nothing. And that's under 507E currently in state statute.
Thank you very much, Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? No, seeing none, thank you. Todd White.
Once. Yeah.
Well, in the meantime, do we have Trey Goff here? Todd left? Okay. Trey Goff.
Thank you again for the time, Mr. Chairman, and the committee. I'm glad that the clarification regarding informed consent was made. Stole a bit of my thunder. I was going to point out that that was in here as well. I just want to tell a quick human story of the actual, like, real benefit and impact of this particular change that this could have. To expound on what I was saying when I finished my morning testimony, my mother has cystic fibrosis, which is a terminal genetic lung illness. And there's a drug that treats this. It fixes the main kind of problem that CF causes, called Trikafta. That drug entered phase 1 clinical trials in the beginning of 2017, concluded phase 1 clinical trials in the beginning of 2018, and then reached full FDA approval through phase 2 and phase 3 towards the very end of 2018, beginning of 2019. So my mother was not able to access this drug until almost 2020 because of the process that it takes to get it to market, all of those things. The problem with this is that CF patients typically lose, on average, between 3 and 5% of their lung function per year in an unrecoverable way. This is not something that can be healed or reversed. Under this legislation, my mother would have been able to access this treatment much earlier, as early as 2017 even. And this treatment is basically a miracle cure for what she has. Because that didn't happen, she was on the lung transplant list for those 3 years while the drug was still under the investigational stage and going through the clinical trial process. Had this legislation existed at the time, my mother could have flown up here, gotten access to this drug, and have retained up to 20% of lung function that she has lost since then. And to tell you exactly kind of the cost of this, her lung function now sits around 50 to 55%. Imagine the worst bronchitis you've ever had, the worst lung function or upper respiratory infection you've ever had. Your lung function might have dropped if you were hospitalized to 85 to 90%. And even at that level, it feels like you're breathing through a large straw, effectively. And she lives her day-to-day life at around 50 to 55%. She could be sitting between 70 and 80% today, were she able to access the drug earlier. That's the kind of real-life thing, the real profound human impact that this type of legislation enables, treating patients much earlier, not just when they're very sick but not quite at death's door, but preserving that longer health span and a longer, higher quality of life. I'm happy to answer any questions y'all have about this or anything else.
Any questions? No, thank you very much.
Thanks, y'all.
So at this point, looking at the time, we still have another bill to go forward on. So I'm going to recess the hearing on HB 735 until tomorrow at 2:45. Pardon me. So we're in recess until tomorrow at 2:45.
No, to what?
2:45 tomorrow, yes. Nope, we're going to open the hearing on HB 1706. And I got word that the prime sponsor will not be introducing the bill, but somebody will be introducing the bill for him. So I'll open the hearing on HB 1706. Thank you very much, Representative. We're going to get started. We have a short time period here, so we may end up recessing this one as well, but I wanted to at least get it started. So you can introduce the bill.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Senators. This bill, HB 1706, repeals the New Hampshire Refugee Resettlement Program, ends the DHHS Office of Refugee Resettlement, and bars DHHS from accepting or spending any money on refugee resettlement. Why would we want to do this? My city has borne the brunt of refugee resettlement for more than 25 years. In 2006, the City of Manchester produced a report that outlined the relentless stress this program puts on the city, and especially the city's finances. The link to that report is in the supporting documentation I sent to the committee. From translation services to ESL classes to job placement to cultural conflicts to crime to medical problems, the cost in money, time, and attention is enormous. NGOs have long refused to work with the city, preferring simply to deliver the refugees and mostly let the city deal with the fallout. The program even managed to kill a young refugee in 2000 because the housing provided had exposed lead paint and the refugees didn't understand the risk. In 2011, the city begged one of the NGOs, the International Institute of New England, for a moratorium on bringing in new refugees. In response, the organization lowered the incoming refugees for that year from 300 to 200. I quote from a New York Times article, "We did not believe the numbers we were suggesting were in any way inappropriate," Mr. Gillett said. "We didn't see any evidence of undue strain on city resources." They settled 844 people in Manchester over 3 years versus 944 in Boston, a metro area that is 6 times our population, 40 times if you include the greater Boston area. How does this system work? The Federal Refugee Assistance Program has grown explosively, right alongside the rise in NGO-facilitated illegal immigration. There are now 9 major refugee NGOs, federally funded with nearly $1 billion, tasked by the State Department with collecting refugees and facilitating their travel into the United States. 2 of these organizations, USCRI and CWS, are focused on New Hampshire. USCRI has permanent offices in places like Kenya, Mexico, and El Salvador. See the link in the supporting documents. Those organizations supply both a steady stream of refugees and federal funds to the next level of NGOs. CWS feeds into a Century of Care Alliance, and USCRI feeds into the International Institute of New England. These organizations are responsible for refugee travel, intake, and the first 90 days of refugee assistance with job hunting, housing, and medical care. Those organizations hand the immigrant services off to smaller, local organizations such as Overcomers Refugee Services and Building Community in NH. There are also numerous other organizations, some federally funded, that lobby and advocate for this refugee pipeline to be expanded. In short, this federal program has become a business model, and a well-paid one. While ostensibly nonprofit, the officers and higher-level staff of these NGOs pull down mid-6-figure salaries. The CEO of Century makes $400,000 a year, IINE $300,000 a year, USCRI $400,000 a year. At every level, federal money is siphoned off to pay the NGOs. As you listen to testimony today from these organizations, or in the future, keep in mind that we are all paying for them to be here, advocating for us to pay more. Are the refugees bad? Most of the refugees are just people looking to make a better life for themselves. I don't blame them. The U.S. offers peace, opportunity, and a staggering amount of benefits at taxpayer expense. The problem is that we are paying to import refugees while we are having a housing crisis, a brain drain crisis where the state is struggling to retain young grant staters, and a healthcare crisis. These refugees put pressure on our housing supply. Who can bid against the feds when they must house incoming refugees? They put pressure on our medical services, often with pre-existing illnesses from life in a refugee camp or third world country. They put pressure on our schools, which raises property taxes and state taxes to pay for translation services, ESL classes, and dealing with discipline problems created by vastly different cultures. Finally, what our state office does is coordinate much of this activity. While we cannot end the federal program, we can stop helping them. And the data on that, at least, is clear. States that do not participate and do not have an active state refugee resettlement program get fewer refugees. We are, in effect, paying taxes to raise our own taxes and create additional problems. How much should we How much should we be required to sacrifice to provide these services? How much should my city, Manchester, which receives the vast majority of these immigrants, be required to sacrifice so that people can feel good about themselves? And I'll end this with a quote from the House testimony. I asked one of the organizers, one of the NGOs who was there, if they could continue providing these services to immigrants. And the response was, our organization doesn't provide the direct hands-on relief. It's for the kinds of policies and investments that make this work possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Are there questions from the senators? Senator Long and then Senator Prentice.
Yeah, I didn't get the, you mentioned the 2026 study where Manchester, did you mention a report on 2026?
2006.
Oh,
20 years ago.
Okay,
Correct, Senator.
I thought it was 2026. But you haven't, you said you sent it to us
Yes, I sent you a PDF that had links of everything that I cite here.
in email?
Yes.
Okay, very good. And what was your name? I'm sorry.
Representative Drew, Matt Drew.
Drew?
That was
Okay,
an
great, thank
amazing
you.
testimony.
Got Senator Prentice first.
I was just commenting, what was your
Oh.
name? No,
Thank you.
Yeah. Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Chair Rochford and Representative Drew. Thank you for taking my question.
Oh,
Yep. Fundamental, yes, press the button. Thank you very much, Sophie. Thank you for taking my question, Representative Drew. So you started talking in your initial part of your testimony about the NGOs that administer these programs. Instead of repealing an entire program that has a purpose here that's not just in Manchester but statewide, why wouldn't you focus on some type of reform or guardrails working with the department and the NGOs?
Thank you, Senator. The reason for that is actually in the supporting documentation as well. I didn't include that in my testimony because it was adding too much time. But if you look at how the money is allocated for these NGOs, you'll see that it actually doesn't matter which organizations are coming in. There was a particular program where the state office was allocating about $1 million for various refugee services, including for older refugees and things like that. And there were, I believe, a total of 6 organizations that applied, might have been 7. And the only ones who didn't get any money were the 2 lowest scoring ones. So I don't believe that any attempt to put guidelines on this or put guardrails on this will work because the refugees are coming. And the refugee resettlement agencies are going to put them somewhere. And so unless we're able to fend that off at the state level, they're going to show up. And there's nothing we can do to stop them.
Well, so thank you for that. So it's not necessarily a proposal for, or looking at a proposal at this point for, say, some reform around the NGOs, just a statement on how the money is spent and that it's really by the highest scoring and then just eliminates the bottom group. So you don't have a proposal or have thought through a way to maybe better format that because to your point, refugees are still going to come. And without a program like this, we're going to be limited on ways to support them in some of the ways that you talked about that are stressors on the system. That it's my belief and understanding, and again, I could not again, I haven't said it yet. If I'm wrong on this, I'm willing to be corrected, but finding housing, working to coordinate with healthcare, working with public education, those things would ultimately be eliminated, but refugees are still going to come. So there's no balance here. How do you plan to manage that?
I don't. To answer your question, Senator, the reason we would remove the state program is because without the state program, all evidence indicates that the flow of refugees would mostly cease. There are other states that do not have these programs. They do not receive refugees. So the state office is actually key to facilitating this flow, and shutting down that office will shut down most of the flow as well.
Thank you very much. And so some of my reading has some evidence to the contrary that refugees will still come. They might not come in the numbers that you're citing here, but there's still, refugees are still going to come to the state of New Hampshire. Lastly, I read an op-ed this weekend. You talked about some stressors that you state are going to be put on the system. But I did read an op-ed this weekend about workforce and workforce opportunities. And this is not just about refugees, it's about everybody. There are workforce struggles in all of our businesses in this state, and refugees that have come to New Hampshire have found jobs and have an economic support pillar through working in these different industries. Any response to that?
Thank you for the question, Senator. So my response to that is that we also have a crisis with young grant staters graduating high school or graduating college and leaving the state. So at the same time, we are trying to retain young grant staters. We are also importing people who compete with them for housing and for services and for jobs. So what are we doing here? We're literally paying to bring in people to compete with the young people that we're trying to retain in the state.
Quick follow-up?
Yes.
So is it your position that refugees that come here through this program are displacing young granite staters in the workforce and in the housing market? I mean, is there evidence to prove that?
Thank you, Senator.
I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just
No,
looking
I understand.
for clarity.
I think displacing is probably a strong word.
Okay.
Competing
Sorry.
would be a more accurate word,
Fair.
which is
All right.
they're competing for housing, they're competing for jobs, and of course that drives up costs of housing, which then leads to people not wanting to stay in the Granite State because they can't buy a house and start a family. So I wouldn't say displacing, I would say competing.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you so much.
So did you see the New Hampshire Journal article two days ago that talked about a net influx from Massachusetts to New Hampshire, about 145,000 people moving from Massachusetts to New Hampshire?
Yes, Senator, I did.
Now, I would think that that would cause a greater competition on housing and particularly housing and a housing inventory than refugees.
Yes, Senator, I agree with you. The difference is that we're paying to bring the refugees here. The people who are moving from Massachusetts are moving here because we've attracted them with low taxes and low spending.
Thank you. Any other questions? It looks like you've got one, Senator Prentice, on the tip of your tongue.
Thank you. Just for clarity, and please forgive me, when you say we're paying, thank you for taking my question, Representative. When we're paying, this is a federally funded program that is administered by the state of New Hampshire, correct?
That is correct.
Where are we paying? Through our federal tax dollars? I mean, we know in Health and Human Services, there was a significant back of the budget cut, so they're working on fumes in many of their programs. Help me to understand where we're paying for this. Is the federal argument where you're coming from?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, I mean, I would argue that probably everyone in this room is a federal taxpayer, including recent immigrants. They are also paying for this.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much. Representative Horgan.
Thank you very much. I'm Representative Timothy Horgan from Stratford County District 10, which is the town of Durham. I probably haven't seen the document that Representative Drew referred to, but I did see the document which the prime sponsor, Representative Corcoran, filed in the House phase, and it was fairly lengthy. And yes, it did have a lot of data, but a lot of the data was kind of questionable. So I think I'm still convinced that this bill is a bad idea, even though the document, and that may be the same document that was emailed to you people, or it may not be, even though it was about 20 pages long, had lots of citations and references. My initial impression that this is a bad bill was not changed by anything it said. A lot of it was slanted, and it was very negative towards the immigrants as human beings. He even said they had negative capital, and I don't think he said they were retarded, but the prime sponsor is in the habit of saying people are retarded. But anyway, we're not here. He's not here, so we're here to talk about him.
Let's talk about the bill.
Yes, understand. The news story, there was the New York Times. I tried to do some quick Googling. Apparently in 2007, there was a lead paint which was eaten by children of Somali refugees, and that eventually went to the Supreme Court. I think the issue with that one is that there was lead paint in the building, not that the people living there didn't know enough to eat the lead paint. And there's certainly cases of people born in the United States who are children have eaten lead paint. So that's anyway. So everyone here in New Hampshire and the USA as a whole is either an immigrant of one sort or another, or descendant of immigrant. Even if you're a Native American, your ancestors came here between about 10,000 and 30,000 years ago. A long time, but it's not forever. Our native tribe are here in New Hampshire. Before New Hampshire became New Hampshire, was part of Endokina, which is the Abenaki people. They've been here for 12,000 years. So, but in my case, I'm the child of immigrants. My ancestors on my mother's side came here about 350 to 400 years ago. They were the people who displaced the Native Americans from the East Coast of the United States. My father's side, they mostly came from Ireland about 200 years ago. Oh, so.
Yeah, and I ask you to wrap it up, Representative.
Okay. Well, you have my written testimony. So just all of us are immigrants. Even one of the sponsors of the bill is an immigrant. Others are members of the Free State Project who kind of say they're refugees from, high taxes, political correction, statism, but that's not the same thing as what the refugees here in New Hampshire are facing. And generally speaking, there are people we want here in New Hampshire because you don't get driven out of your country.
I'm going to ask if there's any questions of the
Sure.
committee.
Yes, I'd be happy to answer them.
Seeing none, thank you very much.
Anyway, vote no on this bill. And also, even if you like this bill, it's very poorly drafted. There's lots of holes in it, so there's no reason to vote for it. Thanks.
Point taken. Thank you. Representative Tellez.
Thank you. For the record, I'm Representative Trinidad Tellez. I represent Hillsborough District 40. And I serve on the House Health and Human Services Committee, and I'm representing myself. However, I wanted to add that I oversaw the state Office of Health Equity for 10 years, and I presided over the office when the state refugee program, which formerly resided in the Office of the Governor in the Office of Energy and Planning, was moved into DHHS specifically for the reason of increasing efficiencies of the state refugee program residing within DHHS. So I think that's an important point to remember. I also want to address some of the misconceptions that were presented by the sponsor. As we know, the state refugee program at DHHS is 100% federally funded. That money is pass-through money that gets granted out to local organizations to serve people who are already here. This bill will not impact refugee resettlement. Resettlement happens through a different process directly with the feds contracting with the local resettlement agencies. And so the state refugee program provides funding to support refugees who are already New Hampshire residents in being able to thrive and gain economic self-sufficiency at their earliest date possible. The concern about this particular bill is that in dismantling the state refugee program, which is currently in state government, there is another mechanism for the state refugee program to be created again outside of state government, but we would lose the efficiencies we currently have by being in DHHS. And also there'd be one vital funding stream that would be lost that currently supports things like English for speakers of other languages and employment-related services. I know it was also stated that refugees are essentially a financial drain on the country, and that is inaccurate. Refugees come here because they've been displaced by war or other reasons that make it impossible for them. Well, they've had to leave their home, often wearing only the clothes on their back. And it's a humanitarian effort to resettle them all over the world, including in the United States. They are given loans for their costs of coming to the United States, which they pay back. And a 2024 US DHHS report from the feds found there's an overwhelming positive fiscal impact stemming from the presence of refugees and asylees in the United States. They have a net positive economic contribution. Refugees are more likely to be entrepreneurs than U.S. people who are already here.
I'm going to ask you to conclude your comments, but if you want to give that to our committee staff, they will make sure
I'll send it by email.
Thank you very much.
Those are the points. Any questions?
I do have a quick one.
Senator Long has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. So the Refugee Resettlement Program, you mentioned people that are already here. These are people that have already been vetted to come here.
Correct.
So they've already been vetted.
Yeah. This is the state refugee program, not the resettlement program. So the people who wrote the bill were a little confused. It's a very complicated process with many actors. And so refugees will still be resettled because the feds contract directly with the local resettlement agencies. What the state refugee program does is get additional funding streams that is federal pass-through money. No state funds have ever been spent by the state refugee program. And then they disperse that out to the organizations that can support the people who already live here in gaining economic self-sufficiency and adjusting culturally and learning English and being vital contributors to New Hampshire society.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any state reps that I missed that would like to speak on this? Come on down.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senators, for the record, my name is Tim Hartnett, representing Hillsborough District 41, Inner City Manchester Wards 2, 4, 5, and 7. Listening to the testimony before me, let me just say to start with, I know of no evidence that doing away with this program will slow down the passage of refugees into New Hampshire. I know of no evidence for that. Secondly, refugees are a small piece of this larger immigration debate we seem to be having nationally, a very small piece. And I want to remind us, the refugees are not people who cross the border illegally. They're not terrorists. They're not drug runners. Refugees are people who are trying to flee political persecution, oppression, natural disasters. They're people whose families have been terrorized, tortured. Children have been raped. That's who we're talking about here. We're not talking about any of the folks who are in this larger debate we're having about ICE, dreamers, etc. So these are people who are living our license plate creed of live free or die. So I'm against this bill. I think it's un-American. I think it's not the New Hampshire way. And I want to remind everyone, this bill, there's no cost to the state of New Hampshire in keeping things the way they are. And in the House DHS hearing, the prime sponsor of the bill spoke clearly and unambiguously when introducing the bill. For the record, he said non-white immigrants are lying, cheating, lazy, thieving people who are and will continue to ruin our state and country. And if you doubt this, we record the hearings. Watch it for yourselves. For contrast, the prime sponsor also went on to expound on the virtues and benefits of racially white, Eurocentric immigration policies. Again, watch it for yourselves. Don't take my word for it. I'm confident that this House testimony does not represent the values and beliefs of the New Hampshire Senate, and this shameful racism is the legacy of this bill, a legacy that I'm sure none of you wish to share. Please vote no on this shameful bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senators.
Thank you, Representative. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next, I'm going to call Associate Commissioner Landry and her staff. Who wants to go first?
Sure. Thank you. Good afternoon. Senate committee members. My name is Ann Landry. I'm Associate Commissioner at the Department of Health and Human Services and oversee the Office of Health Access under which the Refugee Resettlement Program resides in the department. And I'm here with my colleagues.
Good afternoon. I'm Ruben Hampton, Director of the Office of Health Access.
John Williams, the Legislative Director for HHS. Well, one less S.
And we're here today to speak in opposition to House Bill 1706, which would remove the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program in New Hampshire from state control. The state has administered this program for decades now, and in conjunction with locals and state government partners, as well as service providers, we have ensured that refugees, all of whom are vetted extensively before arriving here and have legal status, are able to integrate successfully as well as achieve economic independence. This bill would diminish the effectiveness and oversight of the program without changing the number of refugees who arrive in the state. It would put a significant amount of federal funding at risk, and it would hamper what has been effective collaboration, intergovernmental, as well as with local organizations. If the state relinquishes control of the program, the Office of Refugee Resettlement would still have the same number of refugees arriving in the state. It would select a non-governmental organization to manage the program in our stead. That transition would not be seamless. There would be a disruption in services, and that additional strain would fall on our local municipalities and our state to bear in the interim. ORR has a preference for states to administer the program and has made it so that the largest grant for services can only be received by a state-run program. And it is so important that of the 14 states where an NGO runs the program, 9 of them have asked the state to retake control so they can receive those funds. For context, last federal fiscal year, those funds amounted to just over $1 million. So if we did not receive those, that strain would again fall on local and state governments to bear.
So I've got a question. I'm going to ask Ann if you could continue, or your associates continue your comments.
Sure. I just wanted to reiterate what Dr. Hampton said, that it is really important that we understand that it's a 100% federally funded program. It's a bipartisan program that in the United States has been here for over a century, at least. And that in New Hampshire, this is a longstanding program helping to integrate services. And that if this shift happens, to Ruben's point, we will have the same number of refugees, just over $1 million less to support them. So that really is where there's going to be a strain on the state, is moving this outside of the state government. So I just wanted to reiterate those points. Thank you.
Senator Avard. Oh, John, you.
Yeah, I think it's really important to note that the current administration is the one that is designating the loss of those particular funds. They want to encourage state control for purposes of auditing and oversight to make sure that those federal dollars that are being spent are directed exactly for the program. So those 9 states that Ruben referred to that are currently in the non-governmental organization model, they are now seeking to rejoin the other majority of states that have control through the state.
So just to be clear, just so I understand what you said, the federal administration would prefer to have a system in place that we've got today, not repealing the system that we have today.
That is an incredibly fair statement. And in fact, they back it up with the reduction of approximately $1.1 million in lost federal funding if a state declines to having those oversights and auditing and under state control.
Thank you. Senator Avard has a question.
So previous testimony talked about the NGOs getting 400, 300,000 and whatnot. And there was some that basically fell by the wayside, but the NGOs were getting a lot of money and it didn't seem to be trickling into the areas where it needed to go. First question. And the second is, national news has talked about a lot of fraud going on out in the Midwest, North Midwest, with the Somali refugees. Billions of dollars have left the country, and there's been a lot of fraud. Can you assure that that isn't happening here in New Hampshire? Tough question, sorry, but it is on people's minds.
Thank you, Senator. Can you clarify your first question? You mentioned about the funds that our service providers receive. Was there a particular question about that amount, what they're being used for?
Well, there was testimony earlier. I'm just trying to find out, maybe you can tease it out a little bit more, where the CEOs of these NGOs or whatever are making buku bucks, and I'm not sure it's getting trickled down to the people that really need it.
So for conciseness of response to the answer, the bill actually has a fiscal analysis worked on by the Legislative Budget Assistance Office. The total funds that we're looking at is really not a large sum of money. It's $4.5 million. And it's because of the ability to leverage, working with the NGOs, working with our internal resources, that we're able to maximize on those resources to help those individuals who are seeking citizenship in the United States. As to fraud prevention, we take that incredibly serious regardless of who it is who is committing fraud against the state, whether it's in terms of Medicaid or under cash assistance. We have a very robust program. In fact, you can talk to a former fraud investigator. He's the chair of the policy committee in the House and for the Health Policy Committee, and he can inform you that even going back to his tenure, that's an incredibly serious matter that we take very close attention to. Now, would Ruben's credit in terms of their administration, it's actually a different program area within our agency that deals with quality improvement that actually works on those issues. And we actually have a fraud unit that would look into it regardless of the individual if there's any indication of fraud being committed. And the numbers overall have actually borne out to be not a high number. And Associate Commissioner Landry.
I was just going to offer that I actually oversee our Division of Program Quality and Integrity, led by Meredith Toulouse, and we talk regularly about fraud, waste, and abuse, along with Henry Lippman and others in the Commissioner in the department. So we're very much, to John's point, proactive in that and have a robust program. So I'm aware of the article on Minnesota and that FW and that fraud, waste, and abuse case, and we've been talking about that as well. So just so you know.
I can speak to this program specifically that dovetails with the first and second answer. So we review all program invoices, the contracts. The federal program have very specific terms and things that they have to do and report back before to ensure compliance. And so in terms of the funds being used appropriately, that is something we verify before anything were to be approved. We also monitor the vendors ourselves. In addition, they are monitored as well by their affiliates. If they have contacts directly with the federal government, they'll be monitored by them, and we are monitored by the Office of Refugee Resettlement, and there are site visits as well. So there are multiple layers of monitoring and oversight, both directly from us, by the federal government, and also from the affiliates with their national affiliates.
I think
one follow-up, if I may, Mr. Chair, and then this will be my last question, I promise. With regards to, you said cash assistance, and previous testimony said that there was no state funds or it didn't cost the state any money at all. So the state's not contributing, the local municipalities aren't contributing through any type of assistance. It's all federal money, 100%. Is that correct?
For refugee cash and medical assistance, that is all federally funded. If a refugee or any client for this program were to apply for a public benefit, that would be paid for, whether it's at the state level or local level, depending on what that benefit was. But for all of the services as a part of the refugee program, those are 100% federally funded.
Any questions from the Senator? Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Chair Rochford, and thank you, everyone. You can decide who's best to answer this question, but I think you probably heard in the when the bill was presented to the committee today, a discussion or comments made about stressors put on the community, specifically the community of Manchester. But I do think that this, there are statewide. There's I live in a city. There are implications for any programs throughout the state. So I consider it that way. That being said, schools, medical care, housing, with the elimination of this program, I believe, as I've heard, and it has now been stated, that refugees are still gonna come. So if we pull this back, are we these are named as stressors. Are they truly stressors? And if we pull this program back, what will then happen?
Thank you for your question. Yes, if we remove this program from being housed in state government, currently in DHHS, as you heard, it's been previously in the Office of Energy and Planning in the governor's office. The stress on the local municipalities will increase because it will be less integrated with the other services in DHHS, less oversight from state government, and less coordination among services with a new NGO administering it. So that will increase the strain on the cities, and we work closely with Manchester and Nashua and Concord and Rochester and other cities.
No, I'm good.
Any other questions? No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll be in recess until tomorrow, Thursday at 2:30. Recess until tomorrow at 2:30 on House Bill 1706.
So I remember helping families.